Hey guys, this is Nate Sweeney, the directional leader of the Abiding Network, and I want to thank you for checking out our Abiding Life podcast. Today and the next 3 sessions moving forward, I have the privilege to interview Margo White. She's on staff at Catalyst Church. She just celebrated 10 years, which we'll talk a little bit about that. And today we're titling these messages, Let the Little Children Come, talking about kids ministry, children's ministry, family ministry. This probably, to me, I know I get accused a lot of saying this is my favorite scripture, whichever one I'm reading, but this topic to me is one of the most important topics in the body of Christ. And the more I'm in the church world in America, I see this topic neglected over and over again. We focus on so many other things, and we neglect the most precious, the most vulnerable among us, the children, as well as, which we'll see as we get into this, the ones that are most susceptible to deception as well as truth. And if we don't invest in them when they're young, we miss huge opportunities. So I'm so excited to get into this. Margo's going to share a lot about her story, as well as some practical application if you're in family ministry, children's ministry, youth ministry, junior high, or if you're a directional leader, a lead pastor, an elder team, a senior pastor, whatever that looks like. I think at the end of these 4 sessions, you will be encouraged to say, we need to do something more with our children. And it's not just childcare, it's children's ministry. So welcome, Margo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, we're going to just kind of get into your background because we're laying a foundation to see with her story, it's vitally important to speak to the facts of what we're going to lay out for later, some practical things. So hearing your story in the church, growing up, as well as in ministry. So I'm just going to hand it off to you, and I'll interject as...
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
My background is I was raised in church. Knowing God was a priority from day one. Now, we went through several different denominations. I think I was sprinkled as a baby. I'm pretty sure there are pictures. But in early childhood, I remember church was an environment where we dressed up and we heard stories. It was stories about who this man Jesus was and what he'd done when he was alive, when he was on earth. I learned about him in a similar way as I did other historical figures. It was very much stories attached to morals or takeaways. I don't remember ever hearing about heaven, about hell, or really about evangelism. Those things just weren't really touched upon. And I don't think in retrospect that I was taught incorrect things. I look at it as I was only given part of the toolbox.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
So I was going through life with just a flathead screwdriver when there was a Phillips that I was unaware of.
Yeah.
Until junior high. All of that changed in junior high. Our family decided to try a different church. And we started going to Fellowship Bible in Lowell. And it was at that point in my story that I realized how much I had been missing. Because you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And in retrospect, I would consider my early years in the church to be historical Jesus. Yeah. Stories about things that had happened, things that were often taught on felt boards. So
felt board days.
Felt board Christianity.
If you're that, give it a shout out.
Yes. Not knocking it. It had its place. But within Fellowship's youth group, I learned that Jesus is alive and that our lives aren't just about knowing him, but also making him.
Yes.
And it was here I connected dots that Jesus lived his life as an example for us. It's through his stories that we learn how he honored the Father, how he loved, how he taught others, how he led them. Knowing the stories is important, but knowing what to do with them is that key that I caught on at that point in my life. I also realized that God desires to have a relationship with me.
Yes.
That he wants to have a relationship with us. And that's why Jesus' sacrifice is so open, is so important, because it opened up the door.
Yeah. And you didn't get that with just historical Jesus. That's
exactly.
Really, good point.
Historical, but it's so much it was more in the now and in the relationship piece. And this required habit changes for me. Before, I didn't long to read stories more often. You know, like once I'd caught on that Jonah was swallowed by a big fish and maybe not a whale, I felt like I mastered that one. Like
Move on to the next.
There was no reason to just keep diving into that one every night. But at this point, I started longing to know Christ better and to connect with the Holy Spirit for daily direction in my life. So from that point, I started digging deeper into my Bible and gasp. I made highlights and notations in the actual Bible.
In the actual Bible,
like,
yeah.
With
That's a big step.
That was a big step for me from that point. I started praying more often. There was daily dialogue because remember at this point, I was capturing He's alive, we have a relationship for the first time. And so praying became a part of my daily flow. And I started attending a small group with other girls my age from our town. Well, the following summer, I went to church camp. And like so many of us, church camp was transformational in my story. And I felt that before I'd only known half of who Jesus was when I committed my life to him.
Wow, yeah.
And knowing so much more about him in that year leading up to church camp, I felt like it was time to let him know, I know all of you, and I want to give you all of me.
Yeah,
and I just want to make sure we're on the same page about that. So I rededicated my life to Christ.
Which again, that's such a big deal, Margo, because it's not like a lot of church cultures where you're feeling like you lost your salvation. It's you were growing in depth and illumination in him. And why this part is so important, the pieces are childcare versus children's ministry. You heard about Jesus and great stories and you were entertained, but now the importance of a church that did children's ministry, discipleship, small groups. I just love your story. I love the comparison there.
Yes. Well, it's also at that same camp that I realized I could take this a step further and I can make a difference in other people's lives the same way that my youth leaders had made a difference in my life. And within our youth leadership team, there were a lot of kids. Like this was a large church, so there was a team of youth pastors, and there were some that would be considered younger youth pastors, some that were older youth pastors. There were some that were women, there were some that were men. And this helped dispel some of those typical stereotype barriers in my mind of you're too young to make a difference, women can't be in leadership. I knew that wasn't going to be as big of a deal as I thought it was originally. And I wanted to dedicate my life to serving God on as big of a level as possible and making others known.
Nice.
Making him known to others.
Yeah. That's encouraging. Yeah.
It was a good summer camp.
So moving into, again, I kind of already said that, but to bridge the conversation, help me understand as you grew in your fellowship with God. And again, you can tell as much or as little, but fast forwarding throughout the years, some of the things that were a part of your story to help you get to the point where you are today. Because you circled back and you started becoming a youth leader, but then even years later, your story gets complicated is not the word, but it's the word that like you were going along, everything's great. Corporate career, family, everything's wonderful, and then God's this kind of one of our elders calls it the Holy Spirit monkey on the back. Like it's just something's there and there's a dissatisfaction, so it complicates things. And so I don't know how much you want to dig into, but why the abiding life conversation and why these podcasts are important. Why is that so important to you?
Sure. Well, spoiler alert before I get into the rest, it all had to do with jogging. So jog at your own risk, listeners. But fast forward 15 years from that summer at camp, I'd grown in my relationship with the Lord and served in really significant ways as a volunteer. I was a vacation Bible school leader, a small group leader. After I graduated from school, I poured back in and started leading young girls that were in that same youth group that I was a product of.
Many of which you have deep relationships with today.
Absolutely, still today.
That's the power of discipleship.
Yes, shout out to those girls. And then I was a children's ministry coordinator at a church after Brandon and I first got married. And I had gotten married. I'd met my husband, Brandon, and we started building a family together. So family was growing and I was still able to serve. So things were really great. But that summer at junior high camp, I really thought that I was going to do more, like even in vocational ministry, but doors just hadn't opened at that point. But they'd swung wide open for other employment opportunities. So at this point, I had not pursued college and ministry, like a seminary background, because as a young adult, like the primary desire of my heart, longing was to be a wife and to build a family. And so at that point, college seemed like a really expensive delay in that, when I didn't have clear direction of what God wanted me to do with vocational ministry. Like at this point, I didn't necessarily know what vein it was going to be, even if it was children's or youth or women's or administrative or what. So because I didn't have that clear direction, and I did have some great other opportunities with our family and with employment, I was doing other things. Okay. And I was serving as a volunteer. And here's the thing. It is okay to serve as a volunteer.
We need huge volunteer armies.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like the children's ministry here at Catalyst would not exist.
Oh, yeah. How many volunteers?
Without our volunteers. We have a volunteer army. We range between 80 and 100 people.
I mean, and we're a decent-sized church. We're not a huge church. No. I mean, it takes that, you know.
But it would not exist without those volunteers.
Absolutely. We love our volunteers.
I would argue that they are just as called and they are just as equipped as many paid ministry
100 times over,
that I know.
And that's missed in a lot of churches.
It is. So serving as a volunteer was a fantastic way to love and serve the Lord and share him with others. Yep. But to be honest with your leaders, I should share that I still struggled because I had trouble applying this when it was me and when it was personal. And I knew that God had called me to work within his church, but I was confused about the path that my life had taken and the different doors that had opened and the order that things had happened. I expected things to kind of follow a typical pathway of graduate high school, go to a seminary, college, roll right into a church job, get married and live happily ever after. But here I was feeling confident that I'd been led to Brandon, my husband, that God had given us these two gifts of these two little girls. And I was in corporate jobs where I was making a difference. I was learning a lot. And at that point, I was feeling fulfilled job-wise, yeah, as I was able to support our family financially. So it was kind of a confusing season for me, both fulfilling and confusing.
Complicated is the word.
It was complicated.
Because you're just going, what?
Complicated.
Yeah.
It was complicated. Well, then things changed in early 2010. I had risen in the ranks for the corporation that I was working for, and at that time I was running the corporate training division for our branch. So it was a great job. I was making a great salary, and I really enjoyed the work that I did. And then I went jogging. Bum, bum, bum. Guys, I don't jog. Like, Nate and I have known each other for a long time. You're quite aware that I don't jog. So
it was a seasonal thing.
It was. I really think this is when Couch to 5K first became
trendy. That was the big thing.
I think that if we look back, it would be somewhere around there. So anyways, I was giving this a shot, and I remember there was this specific corner that I rounded from our street to the next street over, and God said as audibly as I've ever been able to hear him, "It's time." And I knew this was his voice and not my own, because that voice was not huffing and puffing like mine was. But so in my huffing and puffing voice, I responded, and I pretty much said, "Listen, Lord, I have a good job and I have no clue where I'd go, what I'd do. I don't even know where to start." And he responded to me and said, "Cast your net." And I immediately was thinking back to the stories in the Bible where they just had to cast their net out there. And sometimes it had to be done multiple times. And sometimes you had to switch sides. But the way that those stories started was just by sticking that net in the water.
Act of faith.
And so it was an act of faith that he was calling me to. And another thing that happened that was very pivotal is that from that moment on, so I was jogging like on my lunch break. So I come back, I was working from home that day, and like work was immediately less fulfilling.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't feel comfortable there. Like it had been
Isn't that amazing
my
how
place
that
in
worked?
my world. And now I felt like a visitor. That definitely made my world complicated from that day on that jog, and it really scared me. And one day I was coming to pick up Cammie from one of my best friends and accountability partners who watched her during the day. It was also your wife, Monica Sweeney.
Cammie's thrown up on my side of the bed many times as a baby. She used to nap in our bed, and I'd come home. Anyways, me and Cammie have a different relationship.
My youngest has been picking on Nate.
She picks on me, okay?
A long time.
And she does it now.
Targeted from infancy. But I think that on some level, Monica enjoyed.
Oh, she did. She would just think it's the funniest thing in the world. Yeah.
She continued to watch Cammie even though she spit up on Nate's side of the bed. So as I picked up Cami that day, I just tearfully poured out to Monica where I was at and what I felt like that the Lord was saying and just how it was complicated. And as she so often does, she calmed me down. First of all, she heard me. She listened. She was quick to listen and slow to speak. And then she gently pointed me towards obedience. Like, well, then we're going to cast the net, right? I remember during this point in the day, you came home from work. We kind of shared part of the conversation with you, and we prayed together. And I felt a lot of peace after that, and I was ready to cast my net. So the way that I did that was I reached out just via email to our pastor and associate pastor. I explained, high level what had taken place, and simply just asked them, will you pray with me? I need someone else to know about this, so you can pray with me, so you can hold me accountable. I knew that these men in my life would point out anything that they saw that maybe wasn't in alignment with Christ and his vision for me and where he could take me, and there would be a blockage there, that they would point that out. And then I also asked them, just keep your ears open for potential opportunities in a kingdom-minded church for me. Like, it didn't necessarily have to be where I was at in that moment. I was willing to serve Jesus wherever he wanted me to. So I put in my notes that I'd given Jesus the wheel at this point. And, I trust him. So shortly after, I was considering a role in church administration when a children's pastor role came available. And to me, like, my thinking has always been that is one of the coolest, best roles in a church. And to be able to take care of Jesus's most precious, that I'd have to have oodles and loads of schooling. And so I didn't even consider that could be for me. But it was actually you that pointed out that you really saw a calling there. And it was in Chick-fil-A, so it was an anointed place. We were surrounded by the Lord's chicken. And knowing me, like, I may have been in the playground prior to having this conversation, but you pointed out that you felt like that I connected to kids. And I don't know if you meant that to be a compliment or a, okay. But you saw potential there, and you asked me to pray about it. Do you remember that was at Chick-fil-A?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I remember all these. Like, this is very, what's the word?
Nostalgic?
They're not roadblocks. They're signposts in your journey. And we've been friends for a long time. And watching it, I'm literally at the point of tears right now because I'm remembering all of this. And it's like, and I think you mentioned this later, is we don't call anybody.
Right.
We train the called. God calls people. And why this is so important on this podcast, guys, and I want you to hear this, her story is so vital because she's just abiding in Christ and obedient. She's abiding in Christ. Her journey literally includes leaving a huge corporate. They're begging you to stay. They're offering you more money. She had to walk in obedience. And so as a pastor who gets to benefit from her gift, it's worth waiting and praying and watching people be cultivated in their calling and getting those right people. Again, it's not childcare, it's children's ministry and acknowledging the call. So I appreciate you being transparent with the podcast because this all matters into the next 3 topics we're going to get into.
Absolutely. Well, and what you said about that God equips the people that he's called, like, hearing that, I believed it, but that also is complete opposite to the corporate mindset.
It's night and day difference.
I was working from at that point because in the corporate world, they tell me to build a strong resume with skills and experience and awards and qualifications, and then go after the job that you have the pedigree for. So my first few years as a KidMin director, it was practically a trust fall. It was completely opposite. It was knowing that I was called to this position. My leadership knew I was called to this position, but I was figuring it out, being equipped as I was walking through those first years. But God was and is faithful.
And one more thing, Margo, to pastors on this is, again, the second biggest complaint I get is I don't have leaders in my church when I meet with pastors, and it's your role as a pastor to find people God's called and raise them up. Like, years you've been in development, and you're now in an amazing, mature role. You're still learning. We're all always learning, but it was it was this cultivation of your gifting and your personality and all of those pieces. And so leaders, don't be afraid to take somebody who's called with zero experience. Again, at the end of the day, it's however God leads you, but it's not always the resume that gets you.
It's not. And one of my favorite parts of my story, and I think it goes right along with what you just said, is now I'm able to look back at those years between junior high camp where I felt like God first started talking to me about this, and now, and I can see that God used that time that was a different path than was expected, and maybe I felt like I was off base and questioned a lot of things. God was at work.
Yeah, the whole time.
And, through being a mother, I have a greater understanding of child development and the calling of a parent to be their child's primary teacher and primary guide and primary protector. I learned people skills and stamina when I worked in retail. All night inventories at Bell prepared me for future lock-in experiences. Through my corporate training experience, I became comfortable speaking with groups and leading and training and teaching others. My time in human resources taught me the importance of structure, accountability, checks and balances, which is so necessary when you're shepherding a vulnerable group of young people. And then just my relationship with Christ and abiding in Him, it put me in proximity to hear His voice. And by knowing Him well, that overflow is where I'm making Him known to others. And so it's blessed my heart to be able to look back at those years and see God was at work. I was not off base. I was going where He was opening doors and leading me, and that He equipped me in a non-traditional way,
right,
but it was exactly what was needed.
What was needed in your life, what was needed here at the church. And again, so many people view children's and youth and young adults and all that as stepping stones to get to a senior level role, and it's like there's this status, and we're all about go where you're called and stay where you're called. And
absolutely.
And 10 years in, like we've got a lot of longevity on our staff at Catalyst. There's good reasons for that. God calls some people away, but the ones that stay, there's this investment that you've had voice in the last 10 years, and you've helped craft this, and now we're reaping the benefits, and you're able to build on top of that in children's ministry, family ministry. And so your story is so vitally important. And to look back, we always use that analogy, the providential rearview mirror. You said it. God was doing this, and I love that you didn't just chase a junior high call. I'm called to ministry. I got to go do this. You just walked in, abiding in Him, and then obedience, and that's such a powerful piece to the story. So, any other thoughts before we close down your story here?
No, I guess just that. At the time, like I said, it was complicated and confusing, but now I'm able to honor my story. And I just appreciate that the first podcast in our series was starting there, and that you honor my story and, felt like it was enough to share.
Well, and it's so cool. Again, we part of the staff at Catalyst, part of their role, it used to be like 10%, but now it's just kind of whatever, but 10% of their time, I require them to go work with other churches, invest in other churches, locally or nationally or wherever, and just watching how Margo's been able to invest in all of these different children's leaders and children's ministries, not from a traditional manual standpoint, from a best practices, from a, well, what did you pray about? Well, what is your senior leader looking at? Like even developing healthy team cultures and helping them. I'm thrilled by the culture that's been created here from 0 to 1,000 years old, whatever, 0 to 100 years old. We have this common thread, and a lot of churches don't have that. And so children's ministry, kid ministry is such a vital part of what we do, but a lot of that is your calling, because I'm someone who is, so I've always told the Lord, surround me with the best of the best. And He's done that. Like I don't have that gift and that grace, right? And I watch Margo in her role. And so anyways, I'm just encouraging leaders here, or if you're that junior high person listening to this, or that corporate person jogging this afternoon listening to this, like don't hesitate to be obedient to the call. Again, not to just run and, I'm going to do this no matter what. But look, she had senior leaders that she went to, accountability. She submitted to that. She had a friend who heard her out and then said, we're going to do this. So there's accountability, there's obedience, all those pieces. So I'm excited about the rest of this. So we'll close this one down. Again, if you ever have any questions, comments, concerns, we're going to post links to some of the ways to contact Margo. But you can always get a hold of me or Margo through theabidingnetwork.com. I can, forward forward that, but I'll let you put in the link whatever contact. But I know she can be a resource to anybody that if there's questions. But we're going to move into session 2 here, and we're going to get into some family ministry conversation. So God bless you guys. Thank you for checking out the Abiding Life podcast. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, this is Nate Sweeney, Directional Leader of the Abiding Network. Thank you so much for checking out the Abiding Life podcast. We are honored today to have Margo White here, and she's just celebrated 10 years on staff here at Catalyst Church. And if you did not listen to the previous podcast, go back and listen to that. She shares her story, and she talks about how God called her and how she is where she is today and the process of that. It's really vitally important to this next conversation because it shows you all of the ways that God brought her to where she is are ways that God's going to continue. He uses the very similar processes in where she's at today. And so we're in session 2 of these conversations with Margo. We're going to talk today about family ministry. This is one that we get giddy about. And I know as a senior leader, I'm a directional leader, whatever, lead pastor, senior pastor, elder team, whatever leaders are listening to this could be one of the most important conversations a church can have, because I've seen this neglected over and over and over again. When you look at the conversations that we're about to have around family ministry, about the statistics, about, under 18, how many come to Christ, and then over 18. When I think about a businessman, if I'm going to invest in something, that if I do it this way, it'll produce 80 out of 100 times. But if I do it this way, add 20 out of 100 times. Which one am I going to pick? I'm going to pick this one. And yet churches, we're neglecting this area for other things, and it's such a vital conversation. So Margo, we're going to talk about family ministry and the concept of orange that we use. I'm going to let you run through all that. We tapped into this a few years ago, but it's something that we do from the pulpit all the way across the board. We do not do child care at Catalyst Church. We do kids ministry, our youth ministry. They don't have junior Holy Spirits. They have the Holy Spirit. Yeah. They're leading today. We have a good portion of leaders in our children's ministry, our youth serving, or other children. We want seamless transitions, crossover points from leaving toddler areas into grade school, junior high school, and then into the corporate body. We want to be able to be a family ministry, holistic, from top to bottom, young to old. And so, Margo, I'm just going to let you define this and run with this, but we get so excited around this family ministry conversation at Catalyst.
Absolutely. I'm excited about this session.
Okay.
So I'm going to start out by explaining what orange is. Orange is a color.
It is a color.
It's a delightful fruit. But for the purposes of this podcast, orange is a strategy. And it's a strategy that combines 2 critical influences in a child's life, their home and their church, so that these 2 influences can accomplish more together than they could separately. So that's that first definition. So at Catalyst, we say that we are thinking orange.
Yes.
So we are viewing our ministry through that lens of that orange strategy.
That's good.
And when you think orange, I want to clarify that doesn't mean that either of the influences, home or church, isn't doing enough.
Yeah.
Or that they are lesser in any way. This is a partnership to do more when you intentionally work together.
Yeah, I like that.
And a simple example would be, at church, Tommy is learning about the fruit of the Spirit. Well, at home, his very intentional parents are doing nightly devotions with him, and they're currently learning about creation. Both of those things are fantastic, and they can absolutely grow Tommy's faith. But what if the church cued Tommy's parents with actionable intel about the fruit of the Spirit that he's learning about on Sunday mornings? And then those parents could use that intel for their devotional time. So
right.
Tommy's hearing about the fruit of the Spirit at church and at home. So he's now benefiting from dual time, the church time and all the time that they have available at home.
So it's reiterating, repetition.
Exactly.
And the primary influence in his life is now affirming what the church is doing. Excellent.
Both influences are telling him the same thing, which means that what he's being told is magnified. It's shining a light on the importance of what he's learning, and it brings clarity to the topic, because his small group leader on a Sunday morning might have different insight than his dad or his mom. Maybe one of his parents really keys into a great example about gentleness that he wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Right,
but he's benefiting, again, from the combined influence. Also, the combined influence makes it easier to remember, because no matter how old we are, we do learn through repetition, especially in younger years, but even as an adult. I can drive somewhere once and kind of know how to get back there, but after I've driven there multiple times, I know it. And sometimes I will drive there and then think, how did I get here?
What's going through my head?
So at Catalyst, we chose orange, I think roughly like 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, that's about right.
And some of the reasons we chose that is because that they do a great job of connecting biblical truth with knowledge and action steps. It's right in step with our mission here of knowing Christ and making him known. So Orange is going to tell you about Jesus and his character and the way he lived his life, and that the Father God made the earth and made you for a purpose. But then they also give children and youth the information of, because of that, here's what you can do with it. Here's how it can affect your daily life. And here's how and why you want to tell others, because this story is too great to keep to ourselves.
Which is discipleship. That's the key. Discipleship didn't typically happen on Sundays.
No. Well, and also just for me personally, if you listen to the first podcast where I shared my story, Orange was the cry of my heart, because I wanted kids to experience the biblical heritage that I did in my early life in conjunction with the mission and the abiding pieces that I didn't know about until junior high and beyond. We also chose Orange because it is a comprehensive strategy, and that's something that you touched on in your intro. From diapers to diplomas, our kids are learning based on this model, and parents are benefiting from those cues that we're giving them to teach at home at every stage of child development. So if you guys have a preschooler and a high schooler, God bless you. But at either one of those stages, you're still being cued. Where we're telling you, this is what your child's learning about this month at church, and here are some ways that you can have meaningful conversations at home. Because where the parent cues are important, and you're a parent, you, I'm sure, have experienced this, especially when the kids were younger. But you get in the car after church and you say, how was children's ministry? What did you learn? And Nathaniel, your son, would probably say, we had goldfish, because it's all about the snack. But if you are cued up to say, did you guys learn about Jesus performing a miracle in Sunday school today? Then he lights up and says, yes, we did. And this is what Jesus did. He fed all of these people from a tiny lunchbox. And can you believe that? Because that you just had some specifics.
Absolutely.
It's not rocket science.
No, it really isn't.
It's just some small, specific ways to bring what's happening in the church to what can happen at home.
And we've said for years, at Catalyst, discipleship, is not complicated, but it's the root word's discipline, right? There's a discipline piece to walk it out, and Orange, or the concept of family ministries, gives the parent the primary influence, gives them the tools to just work with. Like, we've already done this. You didn't drop them off and just watch them and keep them alive. Like, we poured into them, and we want to help then facilitate what you've done all the week before and what you're going to do this next week. It's discipleship. And so it's tools from the church to the parents, not the kids aren't viewing the church then as that only place where God is and the only place they hear about Jesus. It's holistic. Comprehensive is a great way to say it too as well. Absolutely. I love it.
We've used some good C words in this podcast. Complicated.
Comprehensive. That's a theme coming out.
It is.
And so let's kind of move into, because we want to talk about, and I don't know how much you want to get into about this, not the stats, but, well, it is stats, but the Orange stats about how much, if a parent brings a kid, the average amount as an American family to church, how many hours does the church have influencing them, and then how many hours does the parent have? Now, that moves us into defining family, and we live in a complicated society that there's very few nuclear families anymore. And we've even done some sermons here where we talk about there's very few married at 18 or 19 years old, and then they stay married all the way through,
right.
and they have kids and grandchildren. We have step families. Anyways, I'll let you get into that, but
yes.
Defining family is important because we're trying to partner with the primary influence. What could that be? It could be a lot of different things. So I hope that makes sense.
It does. It's exactly where I went. When you said American family, I thought we have got to tell our listeners that we recognize that looks different in 2020. We don't always see a mom, dad, a golden retriever, and on average 2.5 kids, right? Yeah. A lot of our families are different. We will have a grandma bringing her 2 preteen boys to church, or a foster mom and dad bringing children that they're protecting and caretaking for maybe just a point of time.
Yep.
We have a lot of blended families too, where mom and her kids became family with dad and his kids through marriage. And also, I want to point out that blood bonds are important, but I think we would be short-sighted to not acknowledge that when God gave us family, he also gave us non-blood related people
You're exactly
who have
right.
stepped up.
Such a good point, Margo.
These people have stepped up to love us unconditionally, like the family model. They teach us, they show empathy, they show support, and they show up consistently. We have some of these people in my life, so this is personal for me, but also something that I see for the church, but we call them family.
Say that again, family.
Family. It's friends that have become family. And these people, my daughters who are almost 16 and 11, they know that if something's going on and they don't feel like for some reason that they could talk to Brandon or I, they know who safe adults are in their life that we know will love them, keep them safe, point them to Jesus. And some of these are family. It's family members who show up consistently at choir performances and soccer games. So I want to acknowledge when we talk about family, the non-traditional family, and just the people that just show up to love us. Because I think that that's so important. And then from there, let's talk family ministry. So family ministry at Catalyst, we value family here. And that means loving and equipping all ages. Family ministry is not just when you combine children's ministry and youth ministry under one pastoral title, a family pastor. Family ministry is, like you said, referred to earlier, it's birth to 100 to 1,000, however long you live. That involves all of the adults. It is important that the church collectively recognizes the importance of making Christ known to young people. They are the future of our church, of our world, and I think they're capable of more now than we often give them credit for. And when I say that the church collectively recognizes this, I mean moms, dads, young people, single people, people without kids. This is a vision that can be for our whole entire church.
And let me speak to that a minute from a senior leader perspective, that it's taken a lot of time and investment to get there. We've had people leave our church very frustrated that all you focus on is kids, which is not true. We've had people come to church because grandparents and grandkids are valued the same. Like it's drawn people. We have some of our favorite youth and children's volunteers are great grandparents, are people that have so much life experience, and they just want to love on these 2 and 3 year olds, 5 and 10 year olds, whatever. And so it's been a very difficult sell in a lot of ways, but it's also been probably one of the most fruitful things we've done, is to sell it as we are a holistic, no matter who is on our campus, we are a family. And I just appreciate that we've been able to, 7 years, almost 8 years into the Orange concept, but even the last few years have been so sweet because people get it. And if you're a senior leader, again, Orange is amazing. We would send you to Orange tomorrow, but if it's not Orange, it's some kind of comprehensive plan that says we value all across the board, as we'll get into even in this podcast and the next two. You've got to have a plan for this, because culture is created. And so you can talk vision all day long, but culture is what people experience. And so typically if there's an older person in the pulpit, that's the culture of the church. Right. And the church can die from attrition because there's not a lot of young families. You get a young pastor, well, then it's all young families, and the old people feel bumped out. Rather than selling this vision, it took a lot of work, but here we are many years later, and it's very fruitful. So encourage you to jump in on board with this.
Yeah, and when we talk Orange, we're not trying to sell other churches' curriculum.
No, not at all.
Yes, you can purchase curriculum
Orange.
through Orange that aligns with this and is comprehensive. But going back to the very beginning of our discussion, Orange is a strategy. Mm-hmm. It's a mindset. It's a way that we can challenge people's thinking and advocate for a collective, holistic strategy and plan across the board, but it doesn't mean you have to buy the curriculum.
Exactly. I don't know if you mentioned it, I don't remember, but the reason why it's the yellow and the red. You've got the influence of the family and the influence of the presence of God, the church, the lampstand. If you read that, I don't know if you mentioned it, I don't remember, but that's why it's orange. It's yellow and red blended becomes orange. So again, it's the concept we're speaking to.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons, I just have to, toot a horn for you, Nate,
I like that.
Nate doesn't just know this because he prepared for today's podcast. You actually let us advocated for our leadership team to have an Orange sermon series.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
On a Sunday morning. And what we did was we talked about the Orange strategy and how from our youngest babies to our, oldest people on a Sunday morning, we're all knowing Christ and making him known, that it is comprehensive. And we broke down the colors of yellow representing the church and red representing the heart of the home, and how when they're blended together that they make orange. And that is a bigger, brighter, stronger influence. And one thing that I want to go back to before I move on is you'd mentioned hours of influence, and there's studies that we've tapped into through some of the Orange resources that show that an average American church, so the children's ministry here at Catalyst, we have 40 hours of influence in a child's life across an entire year.
All year. 40 hours in a year.
40 hours. Wait, what we're all accomplishing in 1 week of a traditional work model, the church has for their entire year.
If you think about it, that's not a lot of influence.
It's not.
And yet people think I take my kid to church every Sunday.
Right. But and the thing about it is most people don't bring them every Sunday.
Yeah, so
and that's okay. You have a traveling baseball tournament this week, and you're sick this week, and you're traveling for Christmas this week, but those add up, and that makes those hours of influence smaller.
To your point, let's even add they come every Sunday 52 times, and then they come every weeknight, one weeknight a week. That's still only 100 hours compared to some of the others.
Yes, absolutely. So then let's look at the family's influence. The study for this, to be fair, took the hours of the day, but it took sleep hours and pulled them off first. It pulled schooling hours off, and that's traditional schooling if your kids are going to school. It pulled away some hours for homework, sports, extracurriculars, and at the base, a family has around 3,000 hours.
3,000 hours
in a year to influence their child's life. So when, as a parent, if I were to say, I take my kid to church, that's where they're going to get the fullness of Christian influence in their life, is dropping them off at church. That's this little bitty 40 hours where I'm going to take them to a great church. They're going to do the absolute best they can, but it's still just 40 hours. And
we've heard parents, my kid who goes off to college, he loses his faith. I took him to church every Sunday. What happened? And we say, what were you doing with them at home? Like, we're not being jerks about it. We're just saying we weren't the primary influence, let alone you take away the school hours. The school where they're not learning Christ. Now, you can argue either way, but a lot of schools have worldviews, indoctrination of worldviews that aren't Christian. Some are actually anti-Christian. So you drop them off at school and you trust, well, they're going to learn that, reading, writing, arithmetic, but they're actually getting worldviews. And that, compared to the church, is thousands of hours versus 40. Then at home, if you give them no discipleship at home, your kids are there is no shocker whatsoever that they're not serving Christ. They're not seeing it. They're not living it. So Orange is amazing. How do we partner and make it flip those numbers to where the parents, we can resource the parents, give them what they need, and partner with them.
Absolutely. And, when a concept really matters, they say it's when the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
And I also want to point out that in that 40 hours of influence we have here at church, kids are learning within a controlled church environment. But when they're at home and beating the trash out of their little brother over a toy in my case, it was my brother always robbed my Halloween candy. I would try to save it and make it last, and he'd come take it, and we'd pummel each other. But it's in those teachable moments, or when someone's gotten their feeling hurt because that they're bullied at church, that parent can really come in there and say, this is what the teachings of Jesus means
applicable
in your everyday life.
Yeah.
This is how you apply it. This is how you walk it out when it's hard. So I did want to point that out. But I'd like to take us back to some scripture. It's something that I had shared during the Orange Sermon series that we did here at Catalyst. The week that I taught was the Orange Week. So we had an introductory to what Orange is, and then we took a whole Sunday to talk about the church and the purpose for the church. And then we talked about how that God created the family, and that the family is the primary conduit to show his love model to others. And then I got to come in and talk about Orange and what happens when we're better together. And the scripture I used was Deuteronomy 4, verses 4 through 12. And
6, Deuteronomy 6.
Oh, yes, 6 verses 4 through 12. I have astigmatism. For those
Deuteronomy
that are watching
6,
the video.
4 through 12. That way you've got that.
I have glasses on for a reason. All right, yes. Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 12. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates."
Yeah, that's good.
So these words were spoken by Moses, and he was a leader who was appointed by God to govern the Israelites. He was preparing to step down at this point and transition his leadership to Joshua, so he had gathered all the Israelites for his final message. And when I hear that context, I think, if I was about to end something, end my influence at Catalyst, or if I'm about to go to heaven, the last things I say are important. That's what I want to leave you with. So his words were important. And first he said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." So as one logically would have been speaking to a large crowd, he basically said, "Hey guys, listen up. Hear, O Israel, listen to me." Then he established one really important thing. He said, our God, he's God, and it's all about him.
Yeah.
It's not really about nations. It's not about locations. It's not about your personal preferences. Yeah. Everything's really about God. And if we don't start out with God, we might end up in the wrong place.
Who knows where we're going to, you're exactly right.
So he started out with God's God, okay? Then he addressed each person's individual relationship with God. In verse 5, he said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command to you today shall be on your heart." Then Moses told them to teach these values, which they're owning first, to the children.
So don't just take them to church. You
abide.
You lead your children in that.
Yes. You know him. It's personal abiding relationship with Christ. I should have that intimate relationship. And then from there, he said, teach these values to your children.
Right, yeah.
And clearly Moses knew children. I think Moses probably had dabbled in some family ministry, because he didn't just tell the parents to tell them once.
Yeah.
No, sometimes you got to tell your kids things multiple times. In verses 7 through 9, he said, "You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you're walking, when you're in your car driving back and forth to school, when you lie down, bedtime, talks with your kids are some of the most fruitful talks ever, because you have their undivided attention, and they're willing to talk to you because that means they're staying up
later,
right? And then he also says, talk about these when you rise, that you shall bind them as a sign on your hand. They should be at the frontlets between your eyes. You should write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. So in practicality, that these things that are so important to impart to our children and teaching them about God, it should even be visually shown
should be everywhere.
Within our houses. One of the things I love about visiting your house is that if I ever get to leave through the garage, what does it say on the door?
It's wash their feet.
It says wash their feet. You know, that reminder is there as you leave the Sweeney house and go out into your world and your context. It's reminding you to operate from that servant.
And now, Margo, and again, we got a lot here, but contrast that with when they're on social media, contrast that with what movies they watch, contrast it with the worldviews they're getting at school and in their social interactions. I mean, he calls us, he clearly says the most important place is in the home. And so what are they seeing in your home? Again, there's nothing wrong with favorite sports teams, but are they seeing all your sports teams everywhere, or do they see scripture? Like, we've done good at our house again to put scripture everywhere. I mean, our kids, I walk into my daughter's room and there's both of them, and there's handwritten scriptures everywhere, because that's what we've taught them. That's what's going to sustain them when they go through things. And so, again, just another encouragement. It's so practical. And this is part of our family ministry here. We teach parents these things. It's not rocket science. It's diligence. He said diligently. So, excellent.
Absolutely. And, you know, like you said, it is absolutely okay to follow a sports team. To listen to music. But do your activities and what you're verbalizing and what you have visibly at your house, does that show how you're prioritizing those things? Is my main priority those secondary things, or am I diligently pointing to what's most important first? Establishing that strong foundation. And then some of those liberties and things that we experience, that's just the fun of watching a football game, that's fine, but that's secondary.
So you mentioned it earlier, God. He says, Hear, O Israel, God is one. We've talked about this for years at Catalyst. Idols aren't necessarily wrong, bad things. They're just sometimes good things put in the wrong position. So if I put the sports team above God, if my kids see that as more important, then it's an idolatry. And Moses, we already know, 10 Commandments, thou shalt no other gods before me. And so I think that's such a priority is a good word. It's not a C word, but it's a prioritizing, right?
It is. Well, and that idolatry thing, part of my early years and really getting to know Jesus and what it looked like to walk out a life with him. As I was reading the 10 Commandments, I remember there were some that I just kind of checked off as like easy. Like, oh, I'm not going to murder anybody. And I have not seen a golden calf in Northwest Arkansas for the whole time that I lived here. So I kind of dismissed that one. And it wasn't until later that I realized, like you said, that an idol is anything that I put in a position above God. And so I realized at that point, it was in high school. So as you can imagine, I had relationships that I'd accidentally, unknowingly put in an idol position because I was more excited to spend time with that person.
You're right,
and learn about that person, invest in that person, than I was with my relationship with Christ. And so I just wanted to pause and say that, you know, that idol piece is important.
It is.
Because unknowingly, we could be putting things in a position that they're not to be.
Yeah, that's so good. And we could just dissect this so much but we got to be careful with time. But just... do your kids know, oh yeah, God's good, he's great, we talk about him at Christmas and Easter and at church, or is he the most important figure in their life, and then everything filters through that? I mean, man, that's that just gets my heart. Like, are we as parents? Anyways, moving on. I'll let you finish your thoughts here.
You know, to make God the main thing.
Yes.
That goes back to that orange strategy that we're talking about, is when we as parents can do our best to put him at the frontlets. If the church is doing the same thing and we're all working together, then we are shining a bigger light on who God is. And when it comes to thinking in terms of orange, you know, this example from Moses, it's such a great example, and it's the one that I always go back and to use, because out of all the advice that he could have given, he told them to guard their faith and to transfer it to the next generation. And he didn't just call parents to this meeting. He called Israelites to this meeting. He was a church leader. This was his church. This was his people.
Yeah.
And he pointed each person to God first, and then he encouraged each family to lead with love and to point the children to God.
That's so good.
And I believe as much as those Israelites hung out together, there had to be some family and some grandparents and some foster parents taking care of orphans in that crew too.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's a mission and it's a vision for the church.
Yeah. Well, I am absolutely thrilled with this conversation, and we're going to land this portion of the conversation with a couple of big thoughts, which could talk all day, but we're not going to. But talk to me about childcare versus leading with vision for family ministry, as well as flowing that into some of these stats that we've seen, most recently staggering stats. Matter of fact, staggering in the sense of one way, but exciting in the other, that says if we just kind of refocus our attention to this age group, we have a much higher percentage of seeing these kids come to Christ. Why as a church would we not make a vision for family ministry?
Right.
And so help senior leaders, help elders, help children's pastors see this, that you have more than just babysitting at your fingertips.
Yes. So referring to children's ministry as childcare is a
grinds me.
quick way to get
It's
under
like,
my skin. Yeah. A couple of my coworkers, if they just really want to bother me on a Monday morning before I've had enough coffee, they'll be like,
love.
hey, childcare plan for this. So granted, keeping kids alive and well, crucial part of the ministry
yes, absolutely.
that we have here.
And it's
but
work.
we have the opportunity to do so much more. And when we settle for childcare, we are missing out.
Absolutely.
And I pulled some stats that are as recent as 2019 that show that 2/3 of Christians come to Christ before age 18.
66%. That's crazy.
That is a majority that are making a faith decision when they are in what we would consider children's or youth ministry.
And then if
windows.
you only go up to like 21, 22, it goes up to like 80%. So if you take 21 and below, it's crazy. It's staggering. Like, why would we not put more emphasis on this?
Absolutely. And then some of the other things I read that I feel like support this strategy is many of these kids are led to Christ by their parents, which I think is beautiful.
Yeah.
As a mom, I wanted to be the one that, helped Chloe and Cammie cross over the finish line and got to pray with them.
As a children's leader, we want the parents. We're not trying to get in the middle of that. We want to equip you to do that.
Absolutely. But we also want to equip parents to be part of the discipleship process
even as important
of their children. Because so many, I think that if I'm a believer who has accepted Christ into my heart, made him the Lord of my life, I know how to do that with someone else.
Yep.
But so often parents are, they feel like they're under-equipped, even though they maybe are. They're just not giving themselves enough credit, maybe. But they definitely can be part of those discipleship next steps. They just need somebody that's going to come in and cue them and encourage them. Remind them that, Nate, what you do as a dad to Emma and Jillian and Nathaniel, that is so important. And I want to tell you that God has positioned you in their lives with plan, purpose, and intention. And there's so much capability here. And I want to be your cheerleader, your equipper, your encourager, but it's you.
Yeah.
And I'm not a rebuker by nature, but I really strive to be an encourager, unless it's maybe Monday morning without coffee and you said childcare. But I strongly feel that churches who are simply sticking kids in the basement for childcare are missing it. Jesus valued children, and he took time to teach them. He said, "Let the children come to me. Do not hinder them." Yet so many churches don't give children's ministry leadership a seat at the table because they view what they do as secondary to adult ministry. Childcare, just keep the kids alive and well so we can focus on the adults.
The important thing. So
what I'm proposing is a bigger table. That's what I would like to see be different in some of these churches that have a traditional childcare mentality, is get a bigger table. A table that's big enough for children's leaders and youth leaders and adult ministry leaders to sit around a table together and to partner to lead a church under a common vision, a common strategy that applies across all the ages and stages. And that's going to capture those transition points that you spoke to earlier.
Yes.
But that's going to be very much involved in the discipleship process of a child all the way through to adulthood, and not just waiting.
Yep. And as pastors, it's crazy and funny, sad funny, but not hilarious funny, that if you don't connect with that teenager and you're a senior pastor, not that you have to be friends with them all, but if you don't have a crossover conversation, what makes you think they're going to just, when they turn 18, magically transition, I'm quoting air quotes here, to go into quote unquote big church? Like you've minimized them all these years. Oh, you're just a kid. Oh, I mean, I was a youth pastor for 2.5 years and was told literally, just take care of the kids, like keep them out of the big service and do whatever you have to do, but they're not capable of certain things. And I'm like, what do you mean? Have you seen a 6th grader's homework? I can't do it. Like they're capable of so much more. They don't have junior Holy Spirits. And so as a senior leader, these aren't your leaders of tomorrow. They're leading today if you will help facilitate that growth in them. And again, it begins with the parents, partnering with the parents. But I love what you said, giving everybody a seat at the table. Again, I just can't believe how many senior leaders poo-poo those conversations that, oh yeah, we'll bring them in maybe if we need to tell them stuff. But why would I not? Let me go back to the other thing. When we did the Orange series, it's not just that. All of our culture, we speak from the pulpit consistently about family ministry. It's not just one sermon. We do a sermon a year typically to kind of point people to, reminding them. But ultimately, it's a cultural thing. We have created a culture that everybody has voice and everybody matters. And so you're the biggest cheerleader, but I would say I'm just as, I'll put the skirt and the pom-poms on. I'm just as much of a cheerleader because I see it and it's valuable to me. It's valuable to our elders. It's valuable across the board. And so we're going to invest in those things. And so thank you for not rebuking, but encouraging. But if it's a rebuke, receive that and say, think about how you view your children's ministry at your church. I'll be honest, senior leaders, I meet with pastors all over the United States, and I've seen a very negative connotation towards children's and youth ministry. I've met with children's and youth leaders who say, I don't have any voice in anything. I'm literally the peon. Like it's a starting point, and if you really want to reach maturity in your calling, you got to build your way up to maybe senior pastor status or an associate. Or why would we look at it that way? That's backwards and wrong. So I appreciate your heart in this, Margo. And then in the next segment here, session 3, we're going to get into actually leadership and leading leaders and what does that look like. But do you have any other thoughts before we close it down here?
I don't. I'm excited about this next one.
All right. Well, thank you for checking out Abiding Life Podcast, abidingnetwork.com. You can get any resources there. We have all kinds of stuff going on there, as well as if you have questions, comments, concerns for me or Margo, we can get you in touch with either one of us through the website. So God bless you. We will see you back here on the third part of this conversation with Margo White. We'll see you guys in a little bit. Hey guys, welcome to the Abiding Life Podcast. My name is Nate Sweeney, the directional leader of the Abiding Network. We are so thrilled that you choose to join us. One thing we like to do as we every other podcast or so is just remind you of the reason why the Abiding Network exists, is to assist leaders in creating environments of discipleship to help their followers know Christ and make Him known. And we do that through all different types of platforms. So we have publishing, we've got books, and we've got YouVersion devotions, and we've got the Abiding Life. What is that called? The Instagram, different things, the website, and these podcasts. We have leadership teachings and curriculum, all types of things. So abidingnetwork.com is the place for that. I just try to remind people of that every so often. But today I am continuing my conversation with Margo White here. We are thrilled to have her. This is actually session 3 of this little mini series with Margo. If you have not listened to the first 2, please go ahead and pause this one and go back and listen to the first 2. The first one's her story. Why it's so important is because it leads us to these conversations as to how she got to this point, and many of you will really relate to it. It'll be an encouragement. The second one, we talk about, the orange concept of the church and the family and what that looks like, and even from a church perspective, from senior leaders, what that looks like. And then today we're going to talk about leading leaders. We're going to get into a lot of practical application. And so if you ever have questions, you can email through the Abiding Network, and we can get you in touch with Margo or myself. But I'm just going to kind of introduce this concept and then hand it off to her. But I don't think, well, first of all, leadership is such a hot topic, yet it's almost like a slippery, how do you grab this full concept? I think leaders are always looking for best practices. And for me personally, and I don't want to, rain on anybody's parade, I found some best practices and I work those for year after year after year. And I might add little things to my toolbox here and there, but I don't do a lot of major leadership shifts. Like if it works, like recently we were talking about some stuff, and what's one of the books? I gave her a book from 1990, whatever. It was one of the first books on leadership I ever read. This book, it's way back when, but it works. Like, why would we try and reinvent the wheel on some of these things? I think what happens sometimes as leaders, we don't diligently follow through with the principles year in and year out with new people, and so we're not working the actual principles. And so these are just principles and best practices and stories, and so they're practical but also spiritual as well, because you can always point back to how they're going to affect people spiritually. But Margo's got 10 years at this, and she's worked with a lot of churches and our church specifically, and a lot of leaders. So Margo, team leadership. Talk to me about what this looks like in family ministry, kid ministry, from your perspective.
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me back. Session 3.
Yeah, we made it to session 3.
Session 3. I just want to preface this session 3 and the session 4 conversations by saying that these are not meant to be instruction manual conversations. I'm going to share some things that we have done that have worked well for us within our cultural and within that are in alignment with our mission and vision. But it's hopefully, I hope that leaders who listen to this can take some ideas that they could implement in their own environments. So I wanted to preface by saying that.
I think that's a really good preface.
And then also by reminding the leaders listening to this podcast or watching us online that none of us should be in this for fame and status. If you want that, move to Hollywood, work a corporate job. You're not going to find those things in a pastoral or a ministry role.
Yes, that's right on.
That being said, I am an advocate for a leadership style that is based in humility. There is absolutely nothing, in my opinion, that I would ask a small group leader or a ministry coordinator to do that I'm not willing to do myself.
Right.
If a toilet needs to be scrubbed, I should scrub the toilet. If I can't, I can ask somebody else to do it. But there should be no point in which I'm not willing to do something I ask a team member to do. In addition to that, I can't and shouldn't do it all, because I am not the best at everything. And trying to do it all would also put me on a crash course straight to burnout. So instead, I build teams to do the creative, the administrative, and the relational acts of ministry alongside me. Another aspect that I always go back to is that Jesus taught 12. He had 12 in his inner circle, and then 3 within that maybe that he just really, really poured into. But he instructed them each to pour into a small group, and then to tell those small group leaders to follow that same strategy. And I'm nowhere nearly, I'm not as cool as Jesus.
He's
shocker. Jesus. So why would I think that I could instruct and shepherd 150 kids alone? So this is all about the team, and these next 2 sessions will be about, through humility and encouragement, just equipping, loving, and partnering with those team members.
So good. Well, and again, I've been doing this for quite a while, and I just get the privilege to meet with so many leaders and work with so many church leaders, boards, and the concept of team is just usually it's positional. It's, well, we've got the authority, well, we've got the most people, we've got the most influence, and team is again, it's humility and servanthood, like you said. And the beauty of team leadership is, you mentioned it last podcast, is everybody has a voice at the table. We're not going to use everybody's ideas, but we're going to validate people's ideas, validate their opinions. We're going to submit one to another. Like, I'm a directional leader and presiding elder, and I could go and make a lot of singular decisions, but I submit those decisions back to my leaders. Like, to your point, I am not the best of the best. I am one voice. I think I'm just good at gathering the dream team. That's all. I'm just the guy that, you know, like, I'm not I'll get probably made fun of so much because this is so not me, but even from you guys, but the Nick Fury conversation with, you know, he doesn't go out and fight anybody. Like, he just gathers the right people.
Right.
And yet he's not an Avenger. He's not a hero. He's just somebody that knows how to lead. And so I love these conversations. And when we can start with even defining leadership, what that looks like as humility and servanthood, but bringing everybody with voice to the table. I love how you do that. And so before we piggyback to this next point, you know, I just want to encourage you, Margo, how you lead is so great. And even our staff that I talk to you and get your feedback. But as a leader, you know, if you really want to know what's going on, you talk to the end user. And our culture here, talking to end users, it goes back to Margo's empower. You know, we talk at Catalyst, establish, equip, empower, expand, encourage. Those are our 5 E's of leadership development, and you're doing that rather well. So I think you're a great person to talk to. And I don't remember what you said last time, 80-some people, we have a huge volunteer army. So when I have a paycheck and I'm going to ask you for 40 hours of work for a paycheck, that's an incentive. But when you've got a 100% volunteer army, you've got to lead well. You can't just give them a paycheck. You've got to lead them with encouragement and with humility and with vision, and you do that well. So what is your training strategy for leaders? What does that look like across the board? So
one thing, before I hit that, just to go back to what you just said, you know, I wanted to give kudos to one of my mentors, Beth Kenyon in fellowship. And she had told me years ago, and I revisit this thought all the time, is that vision should precede the ask. And, you know, when it comes to especially volunteer teams, no one wants to feel like a minion or a peon that is just given a list of tasks. Like, if you want that, you can do chores around your house. Like, that's not something that God's called you to in His church. You know, we want to do ministry, whether you're a volunteer or a paid staff member. And so the vision should always be at the forefront.
I agree wholeheartedly.
And then we equip our team with guide rails as to, you know, where their bandwidth is, but then, you know, they're able to walk out that ministry through being empowered and trained and equipped and encouraged along the way.
Always driving towards the vision.
So that's, you know, I want to be a humble leader, but I also want to be somebody that empowers my team through that vision first. And so I think that anybody on this volunteer army of KidMin, they should be able to tell you some macro vision pieces first and foremost.
I think you're right.
You should be able to ask anybody, whether it's one of the young people, it's part of the youth group that's serving on our team, or I had a volunteer that just retired after 25 years of serving in our nursery. They should all tell you that we are here to teach kids to know Christ and make Him known, which is the vision for Catalyst Church. And that is applicable from our nursery all the way into what I refer to as big church. So what we do is we have a large group training for our team. Well, actually, let me backtrack from that. And I'm going to start you out as a brand new team member. Is if you have maybe stopped by Children's Check-In and let me know that you're interested in children's ministry, we have a vetting process that comes into place.
That's vitally important.
Absolutely. Like, I want to learn some things about you, and about, you know, kind of where you see yourself maybe being a good fit. And
real quick, can I pause you?
Yeah.
So many churches, they beg people to go watch the kids so that adults can attend church.
Right.
And they compromise what you're talking about. And this is the most precious, vulnerable among us. We should, on the front end, like, we've had people literally get mad because we won't just put them in children's ministry. We funnel them and we make sure that we know them with extreme prejudice, if we could say it that way, until they prove to us that they're not just capable, but they're worthy to work with our children. Like, we just don't throw anybody with our children. And I want to say that from a senior leader position, that if you're not vetting people, then you're opening yourself up for a huge can of worms.
It's scary what you're opening yourself up to. And I'll hit on a few things here, but each of these things could be an entire podcast session.
You're right. You're exactly right.
But one is in the natural and the practical side is the phrase I heard at a KidMin conference years ago was, "In God we trust, everyone else we background check." Is that when you are working with children and youth within a church context, those are vulnerable people in a vulnerable place. And it is very unfortunate, but in the world we live in, people that want to do bad things to harm young people, they will target a church.
Yep, it's been proven.
Because oftentimes, like you said, your second weekend, we're saying, hey, can you go work in the preschool class? We're shorthanded help. And a lot of times the vetting processes are lesser than what these people would experience if they were trying to work in a preschool.
Yep, you're exactly
or
right.
in a school. So it is extraordinarily important that we vet them along those lines. So some of the things that we do at Catalyst is we would like for this person to come to Catalyst for 6 months or be very well known by someone on our leadership team. That's because that if I'm a predator and I'm coming in with some intentions, I'm not going to wait around 6 months with a mask on to do those things.
You're right.
So we do weed out some people that way. Also, in conjunction with that 6 months guideline, we also ask our children's ministry small group leaders, since it is a teaching position in our church, to go through our I'm a Catalyst or church membership program, because we want them to know about our church and our mission and vision, and we want them to be behind it and in alignment with us. Because you've even said from the pulpit, we may not be the church for you. And if we're not, we want to help you get to where God's calling you to be. We want to help you get in the right place and don't force you to
If you're
here.
babysitting, I don't really care what your theology and doctrine, but if you're discipling, which is what we're asking you, you're leading our children, not just childcare, then you're going to have voice in their life. So we want to make sure you align with the vision, mission, doctrines of our church.
Absolutely. You need to be safe, and we want to be in alignment
I love it.
with our leadership team. And so those are some of the things that we ask from you. And then we also do have an extensive process in which I'm going to run background checks. I'm going to check references on you. And then kind of once some of that funnel flow has taken place, then I would sit down and meet with you, and we would share coffee or pancakes or maybe whatever your treat is, because children's ministry is fun. So, if you want to go have, goldfish crackers because that's my breakfast, or ice cream bar, whatever, let's have some fun and talk about just how you're abiding and what God's speaking to you right now, and why you're excited about KidMin. I can tell you more about our children's ministry and how we take that church vision and make it exciting and applicable and relational across all these different development stages. Because one of the things that's unique with kids is that what you're capable of as a 1-year-old is very different than what you learn and what you're capable of when you go to the preschool class. So we have to be educational advocates and pioneers to know how to teach kids at different stages. So it's exciting to me, and I really want to plug in leaders in an area that they will feel passionate about teaching. And so for some of the leaders, we might have this initial conversation where you really think that you want to do middle school ministry, and then you might try that for your first few weeks of training and realize, why do they smell like that? And you might decide that you really would rather try, the nursery, because somehow diapers don't smell as bad as some of the middle schoolers. You don't know. So we'll have that initial getting to know each other phase, and then you would go in and be partnered with one of our classroom coordinators to watch what's happening in that class for a series of a couple weeks before you're in more of a teaching, leading position. But again, the point I'm making there is I want to get to know my leaders. I want to make sure that they understand how the mission and vision is applied within children's ministry.
So good.
And then give them a solid launch with training where it's exciting and they feel well equipped, going back to those 5 E's you referenced.
So real quick, we have a cultural conversation called personal growth tracks. I don't know, I lost the train of thought there. But not everybody goes on a growth track, but we use the same principles to where if I can help Margo discover her passion and then partner that in ministry, she'll never work a day in her life. She's volunteering with the passion. And so what you said there is culture. Without saying what I'm saying, you see the culture in the children's ministry that's been from front to back she's helping them get into a passionate place, and then saying, look, if this isn't, children's ministers leaders do not talk like this. Hey, if this is not for you, let's help you get in some other area. No, once they're in the children's wing, we lock the doors and we don't ever let them out. Like, no, that's not our culture here. We want you thriving in your passion, and if it's not that, then it's going to come across and the kids are going to smell it, and it's not going to work.
No, it won't. Because if you're working within your passion, you're going to do a better job.
Absolutely.
Which is going to translate to a better experience for my kids.
Yes.
And health for you long term. And just like you said, it's a seasonal thing. We do revisit this conversation with our leaders on a regular basis. At least once a year. We do a specific 90-day checkup after they first start serving, just to make sure things are going well, answer any questions, and then we follow up at least once a year, just make sure that they're thriving in the environment that they're in.
So to that point, Margo, and again, I don't want to belabor this point, but I think it's so important for leaders. Listen to the things she's talking about and we'll talk about. There's a lot of time, money, effort, intentionality. It's a lot of work what we're talking about, and most churches will not invest this in their children's ministry. But here's the thing. We want the best. We want the cream of the crop serving our children. Like, you have to prove yourself.
Absolutely.
To get with, to have influence with these kids, you have to have proven yourself. It's not just, anybody can lead children.
Are you breathing?
I want to clarify that so clearly, because this is discipleship leadership, and it's so much more grueling. You could literally just get a bunch of people in there, and at the end of the day, give me a thumbs up and nobody died this week, Nate. That's great. Versus, no, your heart is to know Christ, make him known, to get that relationship, to partner with the parents. This takes a lot of time and effort. If you get 10 new volunteers a year, that's a 30-day check or a 90-day checkup, plus all the work you've already done, plus a yearly checkup. I mean, this is not for the faint of heart. And so people have asked us even, why do we have the staff that we have for the size church we have? Because of things like this. Discipleship driven is not one person leading a crowd of hundreds. It's multiple people leading multiple people, the 12 and the 3 conversation. Absolutely. So I just wanted to throw that in there because, again, this is the kind of intentionality it's going to take to really dive into the conversations we're talking about.
Well, and even another layer of that I didn't hit before, but as a new volunteer, as you're onboarding, we love it at Catalyst when we have 2 services. If you can sit one, serve one every week, that's fantastic, but that's not a requirement. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I see in other ministries sometimes, is that you have to be on every week. As a volunteer, you're going to have to request a week off, or no. Well, part of our process is I'm going to find out from you, what's your preference?
Yeah, that's good.
First service or second service, and within the rhythm of your life.
Yes.
Because your life, your home, your spiritual life, those are important things to
me. Your soul health.
And so your soul health, within your rhythm, how often can you serve?
Yeah.
Do you want to sit one, serve one every week? Do you want to serve twice a month? Do you want to serve once a month? I have volunteers that do all of those different frequencies, and that's a little bit more work for us on the administration side with the scheduling, but that has resulted in big soul health. Goal.
Soul health, and then their longevity.
Longevity, yes.
What we've seen in ministry and ministries is you use people, they burn up, and then they find a reason to leave. They get mad, and then they actually leave the church. People come to our church so beat up from other churches, and we're like, you served every week. You did, like, it just blows our mind. It's not a knock. It's just saying we are trying not to burn people up. We're trying to utilize the fuel of their passion, not burn them up. The number one thing we ask anybody around Catalyst is, how's your soul on a regular basis? We invest in the soul care, because if your soul's not good, it's going to be poison to your ministry. If your soul's good, Jesus said, what comes up out, it's going to be healthy. Then the kids are going to see that. If you come in grumpy at kids, that's going to, overshadow the ministry you can do for those children.
Absolutely. One part of my story that I didn't even touch on in session 1 was I have church hurt in my past. I know you have church hurt in your past. And in the Abiding Church book, I think that you went into more detail there.
Great detail,
But I don't want to contribute to someone's future church hurt.
That's a great point, Margo.
Because having that negative experience where I feel like I'm being worked to the bone and just, not treated with a lot of appreciation, those people that reach that burnout point, they oftentimes leave your church but sometimes they leave the church.
That's exactly right.
Because of that way that they felt.
Yep.
And I don't want to do that to anybody.
We don't have to contribute to that.
Those weeks that they will work to the bone in a classroom, like, that's not worth it.
That's not worth their soul.
That's not worth it. No.
I appreciate that, yeah.
We want longevity. We want long-term soul health. And we do have a ministry process of experiencing God, growing in the gifts and talents that He's given you, and sharing the love of Christ in practical ways. So yes, we want everybody within our church environment to serve somewhere, but not at the cost of their soul health.
That's exactly
or their physical health. And so I want to make that differentiation, right off the bat. So once you're an established volunteer, we have at Catalyst a yearly large group training with our whole children's ministry volunteer army. I love this event because it's like a giant family reunion, because everybody is together in one room and it's a party, and I've got people with blue hair, gray hair, and we've got parents and their kids because they both serve in children's ministry, all ages and stages, and we usually theme these out because we want it to be fun. Again, like, serving Jesus is fun, especially in children's ministry. So we theme out these events. One year it was called Spring Training. We made it baseball themed. Our appreciation gift that year was each leader got a baseball tee that said Extraordinary Leader on the back with a verse reference. All of our food that time was concession stand type things. Our icebreaker game was baseball style, and then the teaching was able to kind of flow under that fun theme because they're learning, they're feeling appreciated, and they're having fun, and it's absolutely okay to have all three. So
you're training them, which a lot of times I'm a dull, dry, read the manual and I'll talk to you about it. You're the fun and
Never.
I need Margo's in my life because I am. Yeah. Anyways, continue. Move on fast.
Okay. So within that large group training, we are talking about macro vision concepts. So things that apply across all ages and stages of children's ministry. It is okay to always talk about the vision for our ministry every time we meet. It's just that they've heard it once in onboarding, then we never hit it again. It has to be important to me to be important to them. And that equates to the way that I train the leaders. And then if it's important to the leaders, it's going to be important to the kids. It shuffles down from there. So we'll talk about vision. We'll talk about any plans or changes for children's ministry that year. We also, and one thing I want to mention to KidMin leaders that's oftentimes missed, I missed this for a while, is it's important to talk to your church insurance provider to see what policies they have in place in order to adequately protect your church.
Yep, that's right.
We didn't realize in earlier years of ministry that our church insurance provider wanted us to have a paper that yearly said that our team had attended training and had received the most updated copy of the children's ministry policies and procedures manual. There were just some things that very much logistical and in the natural that we needed to shore away. And we want to make sure that we're honoring that and we're doing a good job. Because if something ever did happen, we want the church to be protected. And part of that is working well with insurance, but part of that is also making sure that our volunteers understand our policies and our best practices, and that they're following those across the board.
And from a senior leadership elder perspective, we are so grateful for that. And we have been new insurance company in the last 7 years, but before that even, we got so much from them. It wasn't just, they're coming to tell us we can't do this again. No, it was like, you guys need to have this in place because of this. Oh, thank you. They've helped us tremendously.
Well, and oftentimes they provide free training resources online that you can use for your team. Our local insurance provider came and spoke at one of our KidMin trainings once for us. So this is actually, it's a great resource. I encourage them to tap into that. Also at this large group training, we do emergency drills. And that's another thing that oftentimes is missed, but is so, so important. Here, our church is positioned in Tornado Alley as part of the United States. And ironically enough, anytime there's been a tornadic type storm in our area, it tends to just follow a path that's right over our building. And so we do tornado drills where our small group leaders know what to do. If there's a tornado in our area, we have to make a call over the walkie-talkie, and they all know how to move their children to safety fast. We also do fire drills, so all small group leaders are equipped on what to do to get kids successfully out of the building, and then how to make sure everybody's there. And then it stinks, but we also do lockdown drills too, because that's just the state of the world
we're in,
And if that ever were to happen, I don't want us to not know what to do. We need to be able to protect our kids, in the everyday natural too. And so we know what to do in that situation. And we go over that every single year in large group training. So it is fun, but it is important. We also do small group trainings throughout the year. So let's say, Nate, that you stuck it out in our middle school class and you're a middle school small group leader. Once a year outside of that large group training, we're going to sit down with just your peers that are middle school small group leaders. And again, we might meet at a coffee house on a Saturday morning. We're going to buy your coffee. We want to appreciate you. But we're going to talk about things that are specific to middle school ministry. What are some things that are going on in middle schoolers' lives? We would take that time to equip you on some things like encouragement. You may not realize that they are picking up anything while in class because they are super conscious of what their peers think of them at this stage. Because boys are just discovering the girls and girls are discovering the boys, and middle school's weird. But they absolutely are listening and retaining. And so I want to encourage you, but also as a middle school leader, make you aware of some of those things. So boys and girls aren't sitting on the couch together because that couch is pretty small. I just want to remind you that we're going to have a boy couch and a girl couch, whatever. Also, that's a time when I'm going to listen to you guys. I'm not in that room every week. I want to hear what's working, what's not working. Good, do we have any concerns where we need to lean in with this child or these parents and really partner with them a little bit more in this season? Maybe one of the kids in the middle school class, his parents are going through a divorce. This is the time for us to lean in for that family. You're aware of it during prayer request. I otherwise wouldn't know. So, as one of my leaders, you always know you can come to me with those things as they happen, but we're going to for sure give you an intentional time to do that through small group training that is classroom specific. And then within those three kinds of training, onboarding, large group, and small group, we have lots of appreciation for you peppered in throughout. We try to do some fun things during the year, like on daylight savings, where you actually lose an hour of sleep to come to church. We bring in fancy coffee and donuts for all of our small group leaders, and it's just one practical way that we can appreciate you. We try to send things in the mail, checking in on small group leaders, one-on-ones, just to remind you that I care about your soul, your relationship with Jesus, and how things are working within the church. And then there also is an accountability piece too.
Which is huge.
It's very, very huge. And in some ways, our accountability is very practical. Like for us, we are scheduling a volunteer army, and there's a lot administratively that goes into running a children's ministry team. So on your onboarding, if I have established with you that outside of your regular rotation, if you know that you're going to miss a Sunday from serving because you have a business trip coming up, I might have established with you that I need you to put that in the system as a blackout date so I don't try to schedule you. So that's been established. Well, then let's say, Nate, dude, you forgot, and I tried to schedule you for your normal week. You wrote me back and said, I'm going to be out of town. Sorry, I can't be there. Absolutely. Hope you have a safe trip. Can I go ahead and get you to put that in as a blackout date, though? Because that helps us when we're scheduling, and that's going to help me or maybe another ministry where you serve as well know not to plug you in. So there's some practical accountability pieces, and then, of course, we're checking in and making sure that things are flowing well in the classroom where you lead.
That's excellent. And I would say, we've got a few more thoughts here, but I would say all the things you've said, yes, 100% we love. It feeds a culture that's fun, that's accountable. I've watched parents that serve in children's ministry blown away by how they trust the ministry more because of they see that. Other parents that are weird about leaving kids, we've never left our kids at church, and they see this and they're like, this platform's amazing, and so they trust. we've seen our small group leaders and even a lot of just our people serving in children and youth ministry. COVID's been a huge win for us because of our small group culture. We got 12 and 13-year-olds writing handwritten letters to all their kids that they serve with because they missed them. And then the parents saying, my kid posted that on his wall, or I cried when I saw this, or they've been missing their small group leader. So again, it's they take ownership because we've crafted an environment. We've taken them from nothing wrong with an employee or even a worker in the sense. We've called them to be servants and co-laborers, if that makes sense. Like an employee is, I'm doing this because I got a paycheck. No, these are people that are passionate. We're recognizing your passion. We're partnering with ministry. We're giving you these kids this platform, and we have a healthy leadership culture in our youth, children, junior high, across the board. But I see it a lot in these areas because people are so passionate and they're treated well. They're honored. They're respected. They're celebrated. And these are areas that I'm just not good at, the affirmations and all that, but our teams are. And so I appreciate what you do and all of that.
Well, we've really seen them thrive within that. And you had mentioned something that made me remember, I haven't even talked about transitions that we've seen with some of these leaders, but one of the fruits of this model that I've loved, and going back to middle school, which seems to be my primary example today, but middle school ministry at Catalyst, it's 5th and 6th grade. After middle school ministry, then you move into youth ministry, which is the biggest transition yet, because you're
junior
moving
high, you said,
from
is weird.
Children's ministry to youth ministry, and it is an important volatile time in a child's development and their and just their growth span. So we have junior high youth small group leaders that are not even my volunteer. They're my colleague Pastor Virgil's volunteer, if you want to space it out that way. But they are serving in middle school ministry and children's ministry once a month, once a quarter, but frequently, so they can go ahead and establish relationships with those kids. Not because they have to.
That is so cool.
But because they want to.
Yeah.
They want to get to know them better. And then my middle school small group leaders, when our 6th graders graduate and transition to youth, the first night we have youth, we all go with them. We call it crossover night, and all of the Studio 56 middle school ministry small group leaders go to youth with these new kids. Their parents come to. Again, it's fun. It's a party. We graduate them. We pray over them. But
the youth night focuses on them so that everybody says, here's all these, this is now part of our crew.
Yeah, they're welcoming them in. And the cool thing is when our whole middle school posse walks in, these kids already know some of their junior high small group leaders because they've leaned in and they've come to where those kids were to go ahead and get to know them. And so having leaders that are bought into the vision and know that they make a difference, we're seeing people go the additional mile.
We call that intentional organic. We use that term a lot because you intentionally put things in place, but that's something that they organically they do because they want, hey, I'm gonna have that kid in 6 months. I want to get to know him and make him feel welcome here. Can I serve once a month for 6 months? I mean, think about the creativity and the passion and the personalized heart in that. Like, you didn't have to tell them to do that. That's an organic, piece to their passion. I mean, it just shows you where they're at.
Well, and one more really cool fruit that has come out of the adults that have followed that path is we have some senior high students in youth group that have asked if they can be small group leaders and come to the middle school class here and there. So the kids can even know some of their peers and some of the other students whenever they come into junior high ministry. And so, that vision that we're able to spearhead, that these small group leaders have bought into and are carrying the banner for, that is then translating to the youth and the kids and how they view them having a role serving within church.
Wow. So you got one more thought we're going to talk about, but to transition that thought, when I just was blown away years ago when we started all of these, a lot of them were theories, because a lot of churches we didn't see this stuff happening. Is that going to work? We'll let you know, and it's working. But I remember seeing junior high kids that would serve in other ministries and get to know the adults, and then on a Sunday morning, the adult and the junior higher are high-fiving. They're talking about the game. Oh, guess what? They're going to be hanging out with their parents at a men's event, because we do a lot of men's event where they bring their boys, and they already know this other guy because they served with them. So there's this body conversation. I just think about like Cole and Charlie years ago, and just and you're just going, where'd that relationship build? Well, it built when they were serving together, and also Charlie was a small group leader as well, and so there's this now. Diapers to diplomas and beyond conversation, the synergy of the ages that, it's not just big church, little church, child care versus actual ministry going on. There's this body life that's now happening to where as a senior leader, you're going, that kid has a relationship with a mentor. Like we've got young people that are being mentored by small group leaders that I would have never paired them. That kid with that adult, I thought would have been fireworks, and they love it because they've gotten to know each other in this ministry, and now they're thriving in a relationship, small group relationship, accountable relationship. And so maybe finish out by thinking, junior. There's no junior Holy Spirit. Kids as leaders. Landing the plane of this conversation.
So I love that story that you just shared about Charlie and Cole, because it's not just there that happened. That does happen across the board. And we have a kid that I met when he was in the preschool class. His name's Kendall. I met him as he was the Flash, and I'd call him Flash for years. And he grew up in children's ministry, and then he was one of these student leaders that then served in children's ministry, and he served alongside our third and fourth coordinator, Curtis, and they served consistently together. And as they poured into kids, they became friends. And when Kendall had something going on in his life, who did he go to outside of his parents? He went to Curtis, who he serves alongside, and Jim, who was his small group leader within youth. And the thing about it is that example and the example you gave, that goes back to session 2. That's our church being orange. That's our church being intentional with kids that aren't our own, but they're young people that we want to speak into. And that's the way we want it to happen. When we shared that vision with the church, I really did not want some random grandpa to walk up to a preschooler and say, "Hi, my name is Tim. I'd like to get to know you better." Creepy. Instead, we're serving where we're called, and we're just loving others.
Well,
and it's happening organically.
To add to that, and I'll let you finish the other thought there, but Kendall is now in a journey group I'm leading. Did he turn 19 or is he just 18?
So he is 19. This is his first year of college.
He's getting ready to go to college. All these, but he's and he fits right in because he's had these adult relationships all along, and I believe he's still serving.
He is.
I mean, that to me, it's working. Is it going to work? We'll let you know. Well, it's working. And
so far, so good.
It's culturally great. Now, again, you're not going to get the thousands of people. You're going to get, the ones that we have are amazingly connected in that. So anyways, I'm just giddy about that.
Well, part of my story that I shared in session 1 was I'm able to look back at the way that God led me to vocational ministry and see that I had unconventional training. And one of the things that I learned as a mom is when Brandon and I had our second child, Camden learned her ABCs and reading and writing and some skills faster than Chloe did because Chloe, our oldest, taught Cammie those things. She was 4, but Cammie, there are 4 years of difference. Cammie picked up things from Chloe better than she picked up from us as adults. Kids look up to older kids.
That's a great point, yeah.
Older kids can relate to younger kids. Fast forward to preteens and teenagers, we're no longer cool. Like, we're old, we're out of touch. We're still on Facebook and they're all on Instagram and Snapchat. Like, they can respect us and appreciate us, but they relate to young people better. And so in the ministry here, we have kids as leaders. We have put safeguards in place.
Absolutely.
Where they have to be of a certain age to be a small group leader, because we want them to be older enough than the kids.
There's got to be a gap
that
enough.
They can be seen as authority and as leaders. There are some things that younger kids can do within ministry, but that would be a role like where that child would partner with their parent, because their parent is helping teach them how to serve. Because the thing about it is, and you've mentioned it a few times in this series, is that we do not believe in a junior Holy Spirit here. We believe that the fullness of the Holy Spirit is granted to children as well as it is adults. And 1 Timothy 4:12 says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but be an example for believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. And I think that that verse is speaking to us as adults and church leaders and saying, do not gloss over young people because they're young. It's also, though, speaking to the young people and saying, don't take a back seat because that you're young. Be an example. Be out there on the forefront. Be an example in your speech and the way you behave and the way that you treat others and that you keep your body a temple. And so that being said, we absolutely want to partner with young people. Additionally, what you learn when you're young scientifically and historically has shown that those are things that you retain better and keep with as you're an adult. It's also biblical. Train up a child. When he's older, he's not going to depart from it. So you can look at the natural, or you can look at the Bible, or you can look at both. And the things that we teach them when they're young, they're going to stick with. And statistics have shown that if a child connects with the church as more than something just that you take from or an experience, but something that you actually give to and you're a part of, they're way more likely to stay with the church long term once they are driving a car and going to college and they get to make the decision whether or not to keep coming to church. So we want kids to understand that they are a part of this organism early, that they are valued, they are trained, they're equipped, they're appreciated. And then our hope is that they do like Kendall did and move through the ministry and start serving and then make the choice to continue to grow and serve into adulthood. And then aside from that, just like I said with my example with my daughters, our student leaders are fantastic. They do a wonderful job.
They own it when they're in there. It's so cool.
They own it. They are some of our most faithful small group leaders. Our junior high kids often will sit one, serve one every week. Whereas adults, some of our adults just have too much on their plate and they can't do that. The junior hires want to. And like you said before, during this crazy COVID season we're in, I have multiple small group leaders, a lot of which are under 18, who are sending postcards and reaching out to, and they call them, I miss my kids.
They're not just playing on Netflix, and they're not just, again, not whatever. And balance, right? But they're literally saying, my kids, that's something we could dig into deep with the consumerism side. We have fought to be Christian consumers at Catalyst. We are not a place that people come and consume. We are the body of Christ. Everybody has a part. And when you give a young person identity, you give them value, you give them role, you give them authority, and you say, you don't have junior Holy Spirit. Don't let anyone look down upon your youthfulness, but don't give them a reason to. Like, as a young person, if we give, you're just a little snotty, rebellious kid, they typically will own up to that. But if you say, no, you're somebody that I can bring under authority, give you these leadership roles, like it fights that consumerism. Again, that's a whole another 20 podcasts in my opinion, because most of the American church is consumers. People come say, well, we're shopping for a church. What do you guys have to offer? There's other churches. Go right on down the road. Like, we're not consumer driven. You're going to participate and look what you've created in the culture. Well, we all have from front to back, but in the children's ministry, my kids, they're taking ownership of something that will be for the rest of their life.
Absolutely. And what you speak over someone, especially a young person, like you said a moment ago, that's often what they'll become. So if we say you're too young, you're not smart enough, that's the identity that they're going to take on. But instead, we want to speak over them that they're an exceptional leader, that they have the Holy Spirit, that they've been given gifts and talents, and that they have voice, that they're important and they're a part of our team.
Well, what greater, and again, we actually have a lot of young people going through our journey. It's a year-long process. It's the most in-depth, deep discipleship we have at Catalyst. And we have young people. What greater environment to cultivate, not just confessing that over them, declaring it, giving them that value, but saying, let me help you discover. Like, coming out of the journey, a lot of these young people, they're just like, I just didn't even realize. And now, well, I'm geared that way. Like, it makes sense now. And so now I want to do something in that area. we're partnering with the Holy Spirit, partnering with the gift that God made them, partnering with how do we help you, this puzzle piece doesn't fit there, but you fit here, and validating that, because one head, many body parts. And so thank you, Margo. I get more encouraged. Some of the stories I'd heard and some I hadn't. So again, as a senior leader, just watching the fruitfulness of our family ministries here. So we're going to close down session 3 here. Session 4, get ready. We're going to got a lot of wonderful content to talk about partnering with parents, and a lot more stories. But again, if you ever have any questions, comments, concerns, abidingnetwork.com. We will see you in our next podcast. God bless you guys.
That's good stuff.
All right. Well, hey guys, Nate Sweeney here, the directional leader of the Abiding Network. Thank you for checking out the Abiding Life podcast. We're back with Margo White. This is the 4th session we're doing with her. She has been on staff at Catalyst for 10 years. She just celebrated 10 years. Matter of fact, this weekend we got a little shindig we're putting together for her 10-year celebration. And this has been rich. I mean, you want to talk about depth and width in these conversations. So if you have not listened to the previous 3, you can pause this one because a lot of the things are piggybacking off of that. But go back and listen to session 1, Margo's story, how she got to this point and how God just cultivated all the things that he did in her and brought her to this place. And then session 2, the orange conversation, the church and the family, and what does that look like and why do we have the culture that we have. Session 3, just talking about some best practices and what does that look like. Very practical things, some training tools, some just things that you can take away or things that you can say that doesn't work for us. But in this session, we want to talk about partnering with the parents. And so now we've talked and sold this orange concept. Okay, this is great. And it sounds kind of exciting. Okay, but where the rubber meets the road, what does this really look like? And just to be honest, from a leader's perspective, there's so many positives, but there's a lot of frustrations where you got parents who literally are refusing to be the primary influencer in their kids' spirituality. And so it saddens you as a church leader, but we are not going to quit casting the net. We're going to continue to say, we have these resources. We're going to engage the parents over and over, because here's what we've noticed, at least I'm speaking for me and my experience. Somewhere down the road, little Johnny's going to have crisis in his life, and the parents will at that point say, I need something. They can kind of go status quo. Johnny's great. He's the best thing that ever happened. Oh, wait a minute. What is he getting into now? They're going to come, and if you have been consistently partnering with them, who do you think they're going to come to? They're going to come to the church. I see a lot of parents that don't have the relationship with churches, and so they're embarrassed, and they don't come to the church. We have had some I want to be careful how I say this, some pretty heavy, difficult things in the last few years with some of our young people. Just really bad choices or things that have happened to them, and parents coming to the church because we've partnered and helping restore what the devil got in and stole, helping restore what the enemy tried to just completely just kill in these young people. And now some of these young people have found healing and freedom with the family involved, and they're coming out on the other side of these things. Well, again, partnering with parents, it begins with that conversation way back, even into, I don't know how much we're going to get into this, but I have been blown away by even I don't like special, but the unique needs that some children have.
Right.
How our church, I have been floored. I sat in tears one day listening to our children's ministry and our youth ministry, how we went above and beyond and even restructured things because we had kids that had unique needs and they weren't able to participate in other environments. But we went out of our way to say we're going to create a safe place for them to hear the gospel and to participate. So Margo, partnering with parents, I know you could talk about this all day with your eyes closed. So
Sure. Well, the first thing I would want to say, because this for us is very foundational, and years ago somebody had spoken this into my life and it has just stuck with me, is that as church leaders, as children's and youth leaders specifically, it's important that we are believing the best from our parents and speaking life and truth over them. Because as a leader, especially in those situations where maybe this parent, from what I can observe, isn't bringing their kids really often, or it doesn't seem like that they're trying hard at home, or maybe, there are so many things we could judge about each other.
Presumption,
and be critical, especially with social media being a big part of our lives. But if I operate from that position when working with parents, that's not going to be relationally healthy. Yeah. I'm not going to have empathy for them. I'm not going to have compassion for them. I'm not going to be excited about that partnership, and neither are they. Yeah. But instead, we want to believe that at their core, they want to be good parents. They're coming to church. That's a fantastic step. And so I want to believe the best in you and partner with you so that we can learn from each other. And in the last session, we talked about the importance of the words that we speak over each other. In that context, we were talking about young people, but it's very important as we partner with parents.
That's right,
is that I am reminding these parents, you are reminding these parents that God positioned you as Jillian's dad for a reason. He gave you that gift. The word tells us that children are a gift from the Lord, that they're a heritage. There is so much there. So I want to be your biggest cheerleader. I want to be an encourager, somebody that affirms that parent-child relationship, and then presents myself in this ministry as a partner, as a resource for you. But first and foremost, we need to see parents through a Jesus lens and be willing to come alongside them and to partner them, eat with them, even when it's messy. Because sometimes it's really messy.
And it's going to be at some point.
Absolutely.
If they stick around more than
if you do life with anybody, it's going to be messy because life is messy. And so that's what I want to point out first, is that we view our relationship with parents as a partnership. And especially when it comes to a child's spiritual life, that parent role and the amount of hours of influence that they have, that can't be replaced. It's so important. It's so crucial. We want to partner with you to be a good steward of that time, and then use our time to the best that we can as the church in addition to that.
I think real quick to that, I know over the years I've watched, there are certain scenarios where there's a believing spouse and an unbelieving spouse, and even a divorce situation where the family comes to church here and the ex doesn't, and I've just seen some unbelievers won over. Not that they love Jesus and they're serving Jesus, it's they do care about my kid. They know that we have partnered with them. We go out of our way even when things have gotten really messy and snappy, and church is just this or that. We've just continued to love and show them how much we love their kid, and many of them have been won over, and still not buying into Jesus and all that, but saying, okay, they care for my kid probably more than other people in our life. And so it's a huge witness and a huge light to people, and we're just doing what we know to do. So thank you for prefacing all of that with that. Absolutely.
And to your point, one of the greatest compliments that I've received was, I ran into a mom at Walmart Neighborhood Market, and it was one of those families that doesn't come to the church regularly. They hadn't been here in a while, and then especially with COVID, we're not seeing anybody anywhere. Definitely not from the nose down. But all masked up, she recognized me, but she couldn't place me, and she said, "I'm sorry, I know you from somewhere, but I can't put my finger on where. But I know that you love my kids."
Oh man,
and
wow. I'm not crying, you're crying.
I know. Here we are at the line trying to check out, but that would absolutely be the way that I want to be remembered.
And we have loved their kids. We've loved them,
that we love their kids. And so if we can establish that no matter what, you can always come back, and we're gonna love you. We're gonna love your kids.
You're more important to us than church attendance.
Yes.
Again, church attendance, theologically, we can debate that all day long, and I agree. That's a huge part of the fellowship.
Community is important.
You're more important. You're not a number. You're not a click on we got to get more people in the door. It's the soul is so important. And discipleship's messy, and it's grueling, and it takes years sometimes. And that statement that she made says it all. Yeah. You're somebody that loves my kids and cares for my kids. I mean, yes, I am.
Yeah, I am. So you're important to me too. And so we do have a strategy for training parents. That's the title we just put in for our notes. But, I'm not trying to tell parents what to do. But I'm trying to give them some best practices, some ideas, and some information on how we can partner.
Yeah. And a lot of it, real quick, it's very situational. That's what I love about you guys. You've got principles, but so-and-so came home from school, this happened, and it's a crisis in their mind. And you guys, here you sit with them and you say, matter of fact, we offer this class. Let's get you in that. Well, here's some curriculum. Or let's just pray because there's not really an answer. Let's just go to Holy Jesus Spirit. Right now. So I've seen you guys do that.
Well, and we don't like to box in kids and families. We don't like to give them labels either because child situations are different.
Yep.
So, I want to get to know your child, and your child may be under the banner of ADHD, but the way that manifests in your child and in your home can be completely different than how this other family deals with it. So we do want to get to know you because it's important that we partner with your unique individual family and that we have your child in a learning environment in which they can receive what's being taught and not just hear it. We want them to understand it and be able to kind of know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And so the parent relationship is a unique one. It is very individual. We do have some macro opportunities, like we do parenting classes here at the church that we offer. There will be some great resources. We've done classes from things that are very practical, like assisting with special needs, to how to teach your children about healthy sexuality. It is very intimidating as a parent having the talk with your child. So we want to partner with parents to give them some biblical truth and best practices that they could use for that. We also do parent days because as a parent, I want you to know what we're doing in children's ministry. So we promote to new grades and stages the very beginning of August every year because that kind of lines up well with our school calendar. So we will have a day for each classroom where we invite the parents to check into our system and attend children's ministry class with their kids. That could mean coloring, sitting on the floor, sitting in a small chair, doing kids worship with motions. But we want parents to see, smell, feel what their child's environment is. And so they go to class and they worship along with their kids for the first half of their particular parent day because we want them to see, but we want the kids to see them. It's so much fun for a kid to see their mom or dad worshiping.
We've heard that over and over from the kid's perspective. My dad came to church today.
Absolutely. And especially if the kid can feel like the expert. Like, my dad didn't know the moves, but I showed him. That's another super fun one. So that's the first half. And then for the second half of that service where you're attending your child's parent day, you get to meet with the children's ministry directors and the coordinator for that age group. And here, for kindergarten specifically, this is some of the developmental changes about your child's phase that you might experience in the household. These are the ways that we're going to communicate with you, and here's what parent cues are going to look like. Here's how you can partner at home to take what's being taught on a Sunday to a whole better level by layering on devotionals at home when you're driving or when you're doing bedtime or maybe when you're praying over your meal. We want to make it really applicable, easy. It's not rocket science, but some ways that you can partner with us at home. So that's parent days. And then child dedications is something that we very recently at Catalyst, children's ministry and you have partnered to look at that a little bit differently. So I kind of want to unpack why I proposed some changes, and then I'd love for you to share a little bit more of what that looked like from the senior leader position. But we asked ourselves, are we bringing maximum clarity to what a child dedication is? What is the parent pledging to do? What is the church pledging to do? Why? And what does that look like long term? Because it felt like child dedications has been part of church culture for a long time. And so very easily it could perhaps slip into a place of being seen as a ceremony, a rite of passage, a tradition, a photo op, like, I made this and it's really cute. Look, church, here's my baby. And those are all fine things, but we felt like we could do better. So what we've done is when a child dedication is about to happen, we do them here once a quarter. We open that sign up early so the children's ministry team can connect with the parents. Right now, we're a small enough church that's manageable for us. As we grow, or for a bigger church, this is something that maybe you could accomplish in a class or in a group setting. But for right now, we meet with the parents I want to value you as a parent, get to know you, get to know your little one, hear more about your story, and then tell you about how children's ministry can partner with you as a parent. Sometimes we have baby dedications, sometimes they're child dedications, and I could be talking to you about the 3rd grade experience. But we really talk about the church and parental partnership there, because that's what child dedication is all about. The parent is committing to teach that child, to train them up in the ways of the Lord, and the church is committing. The church says we do, that we'll partner with them in that. So we want to talk about that partnership with parents. And then when we actually do the child dedications in big church, we go the extra mile to make it personal. And I get to talk a little bit about that meeting and what I learned about that family's story, so that the church can connect with them more than just by name and sight only. And then you're taking some extra time to explain what it means to the church. And again, it goes back to that orange strategy. Check out session 2. But we're just being extra intentional with child dedications.
It's such a valuable part. I think like everything we do at Catalyst, non-denominational people from all different backgrounds, we've learned to dig through American church culture, traditional church cultural denominations, and say, okay, what is gospel central? And years ago when we kicked off the Orange, we changed our dedications drastically as well, because it was very ceremonial. We had a lot of people that would come to the church and say, because we asked people to tell their stories, and I'm a Catalyst, and well, I was dedicated as a baby, so I knew I was good, and we have to lean in and say,
what?
So your thinking is, as long as you were sprinkled as a baby, you're saved, and you got the covenantal reform groups, you got Catholics, you got all these backgrounds to where dedication, was salvation to a lot of people. And we had to come back and say, that there's a bigger conversation. So we crafted them differently, but recently it's more holistic and really inviting them into the larger platform. So years ago, we did a little bit of, dedication with here's the scriptures, and then we asked the parents to commit, we asked the church. But now it's even a step further than that. All the things you just mentioned, we're inviting you into this, what we call the assembly. The old covenant was called the assembly, the new covenant, the ecclesia, the church. But even this local expression, we're inviting you under this governing body, and we have a huge responsibility before God for your child and for you, and then you have a responsibility to the church. And so it's really opened up a lot of good conversations with people. And again, it's much more personalized. It's more than a photo op. Matter of fact, we even had one person I remember that was very almost like, do we even get dedicated? Because they were kind of taken back a little bit by some of that, because the spouse wasn't as active as and one spouse wasn't as active as the other, and it made them really think. And that's what we want. Like, we want to show you that we're at half court. We're waiting for you to come. We've got this great platform of fellowship, communion, community, partnership, but you got a role to play in that. So even getting away from the consumerism, and then I think the other piece to that is just the value that we place on all people. One of our doctrines is, the human life, made in the image of God, imago Dei. But even more so, we remind people of children it's a great opportunity to say all the things we've been talking these last 3 podcasts. They're valuable because of God's design. They have purpose. They have the Holy Spirit in them. If they're born again, they have the Holy Spirit in them now. So I think you're exactly right. That's just one little way. It's a huge way, actually, but it was very intentional, and it took... That's the other thing, Margo. I talked to so many senior leaders, and and then I talked to non-senior leaders, and so many staff don't have voice with their either elder team or their pastors. Like, you came to me and you said, here's a vision that I see that fits this, and I'm like, heck yeah, why would we shy away from that? Because my team is so good that you guys already processed through vision, culture, all basically it's a, man, you guys, you've nailed it. I can see. Let's just figure out how. You've already gone through the why. You don't. Very, very seldom does anybody come to me with let's figure out the why, because you guys are good at this. So I appreciate that focus as well.
Well, and you've created not only an open door where we can come and talk to you ad hoc, but we have a scheduled time at a big table too. And that was something that I talked about in an earlier session. But we have a table where the most senior leader at our church sits with the youth pastor, the children's pastor, and the worship pastor. And we share celebration stories together. We sometimes cry together or express frustration. We laugh together, but we bring ideas and concepts and vision and things to the table to sometimes be a little bit chopped up and reformulated into something better if we're willing to go through that process. But also so many partnerships have been forged across that table that have changed the way that we do church for the good.
So just real quick, I've spoke to this in previous podcasts and I've written a book about it, but it's in the Abiding Church book. But for senior leaders listening, for children's pastors, anybody listening in those environments, it's in every week meeting, unless something comes up. Then we bring things that we need to out of that meeting into an all staff meeting, administrative.
With their admin teams,
and then I meet with every one of my pastors every month for a growth track conversation, which is their personal soul. Where are they at on their growth? And then, now again, this is standard, but there's days where we miss. There's months where people are traveling. And then I meet with them most of the time, another time a month for your specific ministry. So this is Margo here, and then the next meeting is this is children's ministry. And so again, open door policy, you guys can come anytime. So I'm just saying that's the amount of investment I put, because that's how much I value you guys, and I'm a team leader. We just don't talk team leadership. Like, I can't tell you, and one of my favorite statements is, here's something I really believe the Lord's leading me, talk me out of it. Like, bring the worst, bring the, man, I do not have a peace about this, or bring the analytics that say, Nate, that's just dumb. I've been told my vision thoughts are dumb at times, because it just, yeah, that made sense in the shower, but
that wasn't me.
That wasn't, but it doesn't make sense when you say it out loud. And so I think you're such an advocate. Virgil spoke to this when we interviewed him and did his podcast. Just, it's not something we just make up and write in a book. No. This is a best practice that we do on a consistent basis.
It is. And in session 3, I talked about how we lead our leaders within children's ministry, which is a very involved, do the work, focus on equipping them, but also their soul health. That is what you've described that you do with our team.
Absolutely.
And Jesus had a small group, very hands-on model in the way that he led his ministry too. So this isn't just a theory.
Yeah.
It's something that we're accomplishing from top to bottom.
Yep.
And but it is a lot of work.
A lot of work.
We don't just get to, what did somebody thought that we did as pastors? We just pray and drink coffee. All day, which would be cool.
That's come up more than once, actually.
It is.
What do you do all days? Pray and drink coffee?
I'd have the jitters if I did. I can't do that.
Well, in addition to that, I've got an elder meeting a month, and then I meet with every one of my elders every month, generally. Like, we just don't sit, like, we are developing leaders and empowering them in the ministry, and that doesn't include all the other things that we get to do.
And stuff happens. Not everything leads to a success story.
Absolutely
but
we
have longevity in ministry.
Yep.
And we have people that love God and love others. Yep. And at the end of the day, that's exactly where I want to be.
Yeah.
It's a great place to be.
That's exactly right.
Some other areas that we partner with parents, again, it goes to equipping parents. We have resources available for walking your child through what communion means. They might take communion with you in big church, and we want to make sure that you're leaning in and helping them see it as more than a snack.
Yeah, it's more than a snack. I was just thinking that.
Because if it was a snack, it's not a good one. Yeah. Let's be real here. Especially COVID communion. And then also, we love for parents to pray with their kids to accept Christ. We will lay foundation work for that in children's ministry classes. But, if a child is ready and they want to pray in class, we page the parent and invite them to come be part of that with them. That's not something we ever want to take away from a parent.
Yeah. Hey, I gave my heart to the Lord today. No, the parent gets called in and says, this is what they're saying. Are you ready? Like, let's do this. Let them. I mean, you're exactly right. What a could be missed opportunity.
Parents never miss that.
Yeah.
I mean, as a parent, I appreciate that. And then when your child's ready to be baptized, the parent or parents and the child meet with one of the children's ministry directors. Again, we go for their favorite snack place. Yeah. We will have ice cream or pizza or pancakes or whatever. We talk about what baptism means.
Yeah.
We want them to understand it before they walk it out.
Yeah.
And then another thing that we have changed at Catalyst is our baptisms, especially with young people. take a little bit longer in big church.
Yep.
And I value that you and the worship pastor have given us that time.
Yep.
Not all children's ministries or youth ministries can say the same thing.
Yeah.
But we introduce that young person, share a little bit about their story. We ask them if they have made Jesus the Lord of their life. We let their voice affirm that.
Yep.
And then we also invite their parents to come up in a position I refer to as the hugger. You know, as a parent, I want you to have a front row seat. Come up on the platform.
First face they see coming up out of the water is a parent.
Stand outside, the dunk tank. And Brandon was a hugger. I got to baptize both of our girls. And when I baptized Cammie, she didn't even towel up first. She launched out of the baptismal into a big hug. Brandon was just about as baptized as she was when it came to being soaked by the end of it. But parents there. The parents part of it. I'm working with that parent, and that's so crucial. We also have resources in addition to the monthly parent cues, things that are more situational, like you alluded to, is supporting parents with divorce, with special needs,
grief, anything.
With grief. There's so many different variations of it, but we don't want to take your child and that situation and fix it and hand them back. We want to meet with both of you.
Yeah, we've had parents.
We want to walk through that season with them.
We've had, hey, my kid's going through something. He wants to meet with you. Well, you're coming with. You're going to be in the room with us. You're the parent. That's how we value it. It's not this dark closed room, And I just
it's safer and more accountable that way.
Safer,
too.
more accountable.
I mean, it hits all the marks.
Well, and then when you leave, you've got your action items. We're empowering you. It's not Nate, fix him. I'll be back from McDonald's in 20 minutes. It's the parents are involved, and again, a lot of parents don't want to be, but again, most do, I think. And we have seen just so many cool things like this over the years. Going through a book with my son a year ago, a Making of a Modern Day Night, talking about the Old Testament stones where they would leave monuments, or throughout even just historically, there's been monuments of manhood, whatever that is. It could be, graduating the Boy Scouts. It could be, and we don't have those as much anymore in today's day and age, let alone in the church. And so when we can look at baptism and say, all right, you got to go and you got to sit with Margo and she's going to teach you about baptism. Then you got to get in front of the church, which I know that's scary. And no, it's go to their favorite place. We're making a big deal. Mom's going to be right there with it. Dad's going to be, grandma, family, invite we're going to stop everything that's happening in the big service to celebrate what Jesus is doing in your life. And we've had people literally make snide comments. I've heard them tell me, and my fire personality wants to, we only see a bunch of young people getting baptized. Where's all the older people? That's the point. The stats are so clear. If we can get them when they're young, yes, we need to see others coming in as well. Sure. But if this is the whole point, if we raise them in the Deuteronomy, if we raise them and Jesus says, do not stop them from coming to me. If we can get this in the family ministry, they have now, one person said to me, I wish I had what you had at the age you had it. And I said, I wish I had, and I think I was 28 or something at that time. I said, I wish I'd have learned this when I was 12 or 13. Yeah. What about if our kids can get it young and they're decades ahead of when we got it, and they can be spiritual giants where we're their biggest cheerleader, and we just get to take credit for what's going on in their life and just say, cheer them on. Obviously, I'm getting passionate now because I'm so excited about what we're seeing at Catalyst Church and making monuments out of dedications and baptisms and transition. I mean, I've been blown away by how many of our leaders, not just children's pastor and assistant and paid staff, other leaders going to choir concerts and school days and softball tournaments. I'm going, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm here to see so-and-so. I'm like, that blows my mind. Small groups going to football. I went to a football game last summer or last fall, and there's a whole line of people. It was all church people that were in their small group or that were in their children's ministry. And I'm just going, this is biblical community. And it starts with these conversations.
It does. And, before we wrap this, we probably should drop the big bomb of how we disrupt big church for baptisms. I didn't even touch on that.
I'm trying to think
we might have all, a lot of pastors log out at this point.
It's one of my favorite parts.
I'm leaning in.
I get a squirrel.
That aren't watching on screen.
I get very distracted at this point.
We bring all the kids into big church for baptisms.
Minus nursery.
Minus
everybody else.
Nursery and early childhood. From preschool age through middle school, because the youth are already in there, we bring them in. So that any time someone from children's ministry is baptized, all the other kids come in and watch.
I mean, it's a big crowd of kids at the front.
It's a big crowd of kids. And we pile them in. They'll sit on the floor in front of the platform in the aisles, whatever. But a couple great things happen from here is, one, the kids come in during worship time and we wrap up the adult worship service. And that's awesome because it's great for kids to see what big church is like and how adults worship, because that does help them prepare for when they're older and they're in there. Because I remember being young and wondering what all happens in big church. I hear they get juice. They get snacks. So anyways, they're in there and they're watching. Well, then as the child who's getting baptism is a public profession of your faith in front of your family, your peers, your church. Those kids are that kid's church. So being able to profess your faith in front of your people, that's where it's at. That means so much to the child being baptized. And we don't make the kids be quiet. They cheer for them.
Baptism here is a celebration.
Signs before. I mean, it's like a pep rally. That's totally fine.
That's what baptism should be.
It should be exciting.
Woo,
Yes, exciting and fun. And then for the kids that are in there to watch the baptism, especially the ones that haven't been baptized yet and are kind of thinking it through, kids think in concretes. As an adult, I may not have realized that a child's, their primary barrier to being baptized may not be their relationship with Christ. It may be that they don't know how long I'm going to hold them under. I mean, that's the questions I get every time we sit down to talk about baptism. I talk about some things and kind of give my spiel, and we watch this fun video and what questions do you have? How deep is it? What's the temperature of the water? And how long am I under? They care about the logistics. So as a young person, if I'm able to watch and see the Avery goes down and right back up, and she gets out just fine, then I'm going to consider baptism.
That's great.
And so it's really great for the kids just to see what baptism looks like.
Well, and I know we've had some parents that had meetings and then said our kid's not ready.
That's fine.
And what we've seen in my generation and a lot of my peers is, I was baptized as a kid, I don't remember it. It was just, I got a certificate.
Right.
It didn't mean anything. We want it to be your profession of faith publicly. You're showing, again, if Christianity were outlawed, we're telling the world, I'm breaking the law. I am getting out. It's just, again, we don't want it to be just some tradition and a certificate. I want it to be remembered. It's something that, Bill got it and Margo took him out for ice cream. I want to do that. No, this is your relationship with Jesus. So again, starting that discipleship mindset early on, it's not just, a traditional event. God incarnate, God is in your spirit, God is in you, this is your life's being transformed, and everybody here is so excited for you that we want to stop the service and do it with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Super fun.
Any other closing thoughts? I mean, this has been so deep and rich.
Just reiterating, thanking you for the culture that you advocate for having a table that's big enough for all the leaders, that you value life from conception to children's ministry and youth ministry and the adults. For my primary training, and if you listen to session 1, I was primarily trained within this environment, and this is a fantastic environment. It's been a rough wake-up call for me to hear so many of my peers that don't have the budget support, don't have the support where they ever get a mention in big church, that are referred to as childcare. I understand that what we have is special, but I also understand that what we have is valuable enough that we've got to share it with others. We want to encourage other leaders there are some leaders that are listening to this call that need to get a bigger table. They need to make space for these other leaders. And then there are some leaders, children's ministry leaders, that are listening. And I just want to encourage you that your calling and your voice is important, and to keep requesting a seat at that table, because what you do in a life of a child, it's worth it. It's worth the world.
That's exactly right.
It's never going to return back void. And so
I can't think of a better way to close that out, Margo. And again, we've said this multiple times. abidingnetwork.com. If you ever want questions, comments, concerns, if you're a senior leader that says, man, I've been convicted or encouraged, if you're a children's pastor that wants someone just to pray with you, if you heard some things, I mean, there is behind 4 sessions and 2.5 hours here, we have years of experience, practices, things that we're not doing now that worked well in a season that might be for you. We're at a different stage now that we're not, you might be where we were. And, there's so many things that we are an open book. We just love to, we send stuff to people and we just say, take the catalyst name off and just put your name in there and do it. Sure. Like we have this catalyst in a box where we help people just, we'll just hand off whatever we have because it's kingdom. And at the end of the day, I just echo what Margo said. If you could just, take a moment and just before the Lord and just establish your calling. Just say, Lord, I'm frustrated, I'm sad, I'm struggling, but I am validated. Like this podcast is reminding you that, Jesus put huge precedence on children. Yeah. Moses specifically stopped what he was doing at the end of his life. Again, he gave a lot of other details for civil law and political law and all that stuff, but he said, look, the children, how fun. He said, hey, children, give this to your children, pass it on to the next generation. It's that valuable. And so God bless you. I don't know why, but I just feel like just a sobering ending to this, that churches need this message, Margo. And there's just such an anointing on people who have been through the fire and come out on the other side. And we've been burned, we've been hurt, we've made we've made so many mistakes. It's just not even, and that's one thing one of our cultural pieces is failure is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn. Criticism, even though people who are critical sometimes, there's usually truth in criticism, and we can say, I'm going to put my hurt feelings aside and say, how can I learn from that? Because there's some truth to what you're saying. So we've got a lot of history, a lot of experience, and then a lot of things that we have no idea, but we can point you to other people who are doing what we're not doing. So God bless you guys. Thank you for checking this out, and we'll see you next time on the Abiding Life Podcast.